Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. We have a presentation on the floating homestead exemption, and then we'll go ahead and go into public comment from then. Oh, water sewer rate study first. Got it. Carter and Sloop, water and sewer tier and rate study presentation. Is Mr. Smith doing that?
No, ma'am.
No. I'm looking here. Okay.
Hi, my name is Mark Hain. I'm with Carter and Sloop. I work with Matt Smith. Chrissy Garrison and I pulled together this rate study presentation. Chrissy's going to be leading most of it, but just to give you guys some backup information, we were approached by the city to look at the water and sewer rates, not just the rates, but the structure of those rates and how effective they're being used. We looked at 12 months of data from a period in fiscal year 23 that looked at usage, how things are being billed, all that kind of stuff, as well as several years of financial data from the water and sewer fund. We didn't look at anything overview of the city's finances. We strictly kept it to the water and sewer fund in the system. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chrissy, and she's going to present on it.
Hi, good morning. Again, my name's Chrissy. Nice to see you guys.
Morning.
So we wanted to look at the current rate structure. I'm realizing now that I don't have a clicker for the... Thank you. We wanted to look at the current rate structure that the city has in place, and it includes a base fee and consumption charges, which we'll explain in more detail in a minute. We have several customer categories. We have the commercial, industrial, residential. We also have irrigation customers and fire line customers. The water tier structure, there's a tier structure for the water customers for residential and non-residential, which essentially means that the cost of each 1,000 gallons of water increases the more water you use. And the combination of all of these different components of the rate structure adds a certain layer of complexity to the rate structure. Just to explain, your base fees are a fee that every customer is charged between water and sewer. It's a set fee that's charged every month. And there is a different fee set for the customers who are inside of the city limits and customers who are outside of the city limits, where customers outside of the city limits have a slightly higher fee. For the consumption charges, which is again the charge for every 1,000 gallons of water, it's split for water between residential and non-residential, with non-residential customers being your commercial customers and your industrial customers. And as we stated, it's a tiered rate structure for the water customers. So, for example, the first tier for the residential customers is from 0 to 2,000, and that's $4.24. And then customers who use from 2 to 10,000, their water costs $5.17. As you move down to the non-residential usage, you'll see that it's based on water meter size. And as the water meter size increases, the volume included in each tier increases as well. So again, for example, your 3/4 inch meter customer, they get 5,000 gallons at $5.17, whereas your 6-inch water meter customer, they get 500,000 gallons included at tier 1 rates, effectively giving them a discount on the water that they use, which we'll touch on a little bit more. The industrial customers are billed at tier 1 rates regardless of their consumption, at tier 1 non-residential rates. And the sewer customers are not tiered for their usage. They do still have inside and outside city limits. charges where outside city limits customers are charged a bit more. Do we have any questions so far? Okay. So now that we've reviewed sort of what our current rate structure looks like, we also wanted to look at what the customers look like for the water system. And the majority of the accounts for the water system are residential accounts, with there being 87% of the accounts being residential and 9% are commercial accounts, industrial, irrigation, and fire sprinklers being 5% of those accounts. We also wanted to see what those customers were using. So 56% of the consumption is from the residential accounts, 28% is from industrial, and then 10% is from, 56% is residential and 28% is commercial, with 10% coming from industrial. We also wanted to take a quick look at revenue, and it is fairly in line with the consumption patterns of each account category, with 59% coming from residential, 30% from commercial, and 7% from industrial. Now, because the residential and commercial categories make up the largest portion of the system's consumption, we wanted to do a deep dive into those customer categories and see kind of the accounts associated with those categories. Not to say that the industrial category is insignificant, it is significant, but with only 60 accounts, we felt it was more important to look at the consumption and customer categories for residential and commercial. So we started with residential accounts, and as you can see, 75% of the residential customers used 5,000 gallons of water or less per month, and 4% of customers used more than 10,000 gallons of water per month. We felt this was significant because, again, the current rate structure for residential customers breaks at 2,000 gallons, 10,000 gallons, and 20,000 gallons, I believe, which means, yes, that's correct, which means that for Tier 3 and Tier 4, which are 10,000 gallons and above, there's only 4% of customers hitting those tiers. And we'll touch more on that in a moment. Because there are 75% of customers using less than 10,000 gallons, we also wanted to see what the customer accounts looked like, and what the usage looked like within that 10,000 gallons. 29% of customers used less than 2,000 gallons, and as I said, the first tier is 0 to 2,000 gallons for residential customers, so we felt that that made a good amount of sense. And then, let's see, we still have 4% of customers who use less than 10,000 gallons, but you've got a fair amount of your consumption happening from 5,000 gallons and below. Okay, so we also checked out the amount of commercial accounts. We organized this by meter size just because in the rate structure, we have different tiers for each water meter size. So we wanted to see how significant that was in terms of what your accounts looked like. And 63% of the commercial accounts are 3/4 inch water meters, so much smaller meters. And the majority of the accounts are on 2-inch water meters or less. We also wanted to see what the consumption patterns were, and 68% of the commercial customers use less than 5,000 gallons, and 8% use between 5 and 10,000 gallons. The more significant part of this chart to us was that only 15% of customers use 20,000 gallons. And this is significant because even though there are several different tier structures for the different sized meters, there are only 2 of those tier structures that include 20,000 within that do not include 20,000 within that first tier. So for example, your 3/4 inch customer has, your 3/4 inch customer includes 5,000 gallons in that first tier. So if they were to use 20,000 gallons, 15,000 gallons would be charged at a tier 2 rate. If you go to a 2-inch water meter customer, their first 40,000 gallons is charged at tier 1. So the 2-inch water meter customer would pay significantly less than a 3/4 inch meter customer would for the same amount of water, essentially. And we also looked at the sewer accounts. We organized this by water meter size because their base fees are organized by water meter size, and 96% of those customers are on 3/4 inch or smaller water meters. There is a differentiation between inside and outside customers, but currently there are no customers on sewer who are billed for the outside city rates. Do we have any questions so far? Okay. So now we know what our rate structure looks like, and we know a little bit more about our consumption patterns and the accounts that we have. So we wanted to jump into a history of the water and sewer funds revenues and expenses. And what we focused on for revenues was the charges for services for the water and sewer department, and that's our base fees and our consumption charges. And our customer fees and operational fees, that's your tap fees, your late payment fees, your bad check fees, things like that. And for expenses, we looked at operational expenses, which is your expenses to keep the system maintained and running. We also had debt service, so your GFA loans and your revenue bonds. And we had a list from the city on which loans and bonds to include, and those were for various water and sewer projects that we've performed. We also included transfers out in the expenses. Now, there were some transfers out that were specifically to pay for debt repayment, and we were sure to not double count those transfers out. And this is sort of how we've modeled that data for you, and in our in the calculator that we had created to track the revenues and expenses. You'll see the two columns for water and sewer expenses. Those are totaled in the column to the left of those in the total operating expenses. We've split out the GFA debt by water and sewer, and the two different revenue bonds that were prior to 2023. We also included the transfers out, again, less the debt coverage, for a total water and sewer expenses amount. The revenue is, as we discussed, just the water and sewer service charges, water and sewer fees. And that's the data for 2019 to 2023. Not as easy to visualize as a chart, so we also created a chart for you guys. And as you can see, from 2019 to 2023, the expenses have, the revenue has exceeded the expenses. There was a leap in 2023 for the revenue, and that's because of the 5% rate increases that the Water and Sewer Department have implemented over that year. There was also a leap in expenses. There was a large transfer to the stormwater fund, and our understanding is that that was a one-time occurrence, not something that happens every year, and we don't anticipate that to be regular moving forward. But as you can see, there is definitely a trend in expenses increasing over time through 2023. So we wanted to go ahead and project out into future years. So in order to project our expenses, we took an average of the 2019 through 2023 operating expenses and found there was a 7.75% increase per year. We projected that out through 2027. There's also a list of the known debt service, that's your GFA loans and your revenue bonds. We were able to obviously predict that with a higher level of confidence just because the agreements for those are set on set loan terms. We also received a list of future capital projects that the city is endeavoring to develop. We felt that $20 million over a 20-year loan period at a 2% interest rate was a conservative place to start. We also are aware that there have been several developments approved by the city, and with that, there will be higher maintenance costs. And because the city is currently purchasing water, we anticipate that purchased water will be used for those developments as well, which will add to the expenses. So speaking on purchased water expenses, the Douglas County, their cost is going to increase by 10 cents, and then Carroll County Water Authority, their cost is increasing, I think that was by about 80%. So it's a significant cost increase, and you're going to need to be purchasing even more of that water as well. We also projected revenues. We started by assuming that the customer data that we received for 2023 was a typical year's worth of consumption and projected that usage forward. We also applied some growth factors through 25, 26, and 27 based on the list of approved developments that the city provided us. Water and sewer fees, we took an average of our audited data, projected that forward. And again, the purchase, I think that was included by mistake. We also assumed that the city was going to simplify their tier structure. And we discussed that, we touched on that a little bit previously, but I wanted to kind of take a deeper look at that. So, as I mentioned before, 4% of the residential customers use above 10,000 gallons of water per day, or per month, I'm sorry. And as you can see here, well, there's tiers 3 and tier 4 for residential water, and only 4% of customers are ever seeing that. We felt that it would be more beneficial and would match customer consumption a bit better if we adjusted those tiers so that the tier breaks were for tier 2 would be from 2 to 5,000 customers. That means that your average residential customer who uses approximately 4,000 gallons per month would still stay in tier 2. And then tier 3 would be from 5 to 10,000. Tier 4 would be for 10,000 plus. And not only would this keep the tier 1 and tier 2 rates the same for the average senior residential and average residential users, it would mean that you are encouraging your higher users to conserve water. And for the non-residential customers, specifically the commercial customers, we recommend that we consolidate the tier structure, since each water meter size has essentially its own tier structure. We wanted to consolidate that into a single tier structure. I believe this is the example of what that simplified tier structure would look like. And with the non-residential tier structure, we would be changing the amount of gallons included per each tier, since we found that 68%, I believe, of the commercial customers use within 5,000 gallons. That means a significant amount of commercial customers would not see an increase. And again, it encourages those higher users to conserve more of their water since they'll be seeing the higher tier rates. So this is essentially a depiction of the projected revenues and expenses alongside the historical revenues and expenses. The gold bar is the revenue needed for debt service coverage. That's a 1.05 ratio, essentially meaning that you would take the debt that you are going to incur and add 5% on top of that. Anywhere that you're going to borrow funds, you're going to need to make sure that your revenue exceeds your expenses by that much in order to continue to borrow money from them, whether that's from the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority, whether that's from revenue bonds. And right now, our projections show that you're at a delta between where your revenues will be and your expenses will be from 25 through 27. So we've developed 3 different options for the city to consider. Each of these will make it so that your revenues will exceed your expenses for fiscal year 25 and 26. And it brings us back into a negative delta for 27. But it does help us get to a good place for the next 2 years. Keep in mind that as we were modeling this data, it assumed that these rate increases would be taking place around September of 2024, which I believe is the beginning of the city's fiscal year. So the revenues that we're projecting here and what you would see when implementing them might differ slightly. So option 1, we were increasing the water and sewer base fee by 20% and the consumption charges by 12%, which it's kind of hard to visualize the percentage increases. So we went ahead and broke out what that would look like for your different customers. And just focusing on the average residential user, their water and sewer combined bill would increase by about $12 with option 1. And as stated before, this will bring you into a positive revenue for fiscal years 25 and 26, and then the expenses exceed revenue by fiscal year 2027. Option 2, we decided, since the city hasn't really changed the water and sewer base fees, we wanted an option where we could continue doing that if we wanted to, and then adjusted the consumption charges to 20%, to increase by 20%. Now with this option, the water and sewer base fees are for each customer. So you're guaranteed, if you increase the base fee, you're guaranteed that money each month. Whereas the consumption charges, they might be a little bit more variable, because if you increase that, customers can change the way that they use their water. But we also want to focus on the fact that if you increase the consumption charge, it leaves it up to customers to conserve water and save water, thereby saving their own money. So again, looking at your average residential user's bill, their combined water and sewer bill, it's an increase of about $11, a little under $11. And again, we see that revenues exceed expenses for 25 and 26, and then we're at a deficit again for fiscal year 27. And option 3 was sort of our middle of the road option. It increased the water and sewer base fee by 15% and the water and sewer consumption charge by 15%. And the average residential user's combined water and sewer bill would increase by a little over $12. And in terms of the revenue trajectory, it's very similar to option 2, in that the delta between the expenses and revenue needed for debt service coverage is very similar. You'll still see positive for 25 and 26, and then again, we'll be at a negative delta for 2027. So just to summarize the overall need for these increases, the city is expected to receive cost increase from Douglasville, Douglas County, and from Carroll County Water Authority. And in addition to that, we have a list of approved developments that are going to require additional purchase of water. So additional purchase of water plus additional costs increases the city's expenses. The operating expenses are set to increase at 7.75% annually. This number is a little bit variable. If we go back and look at the operating expenses for each fiscal year, this did bounce around, so we couldn't project that with the highest level of confidence, but we felt that that was a conservative place to start since it was the average of the 2019 through 2023. And additionally, we have the expenses for the future debt service, the list of capital projects that the city is trying to get done. We assumed 20 million was a good place to start. That is something that is, I suppose, up for debate. If that number can fluctuate, or if we are able to use a $20 million loan, just keep in mind that that number can change by about $300,000 per year for every $5 million financed, whether that's more or less. Just wanted to make sure we didn't have any questions about the current tier structure versus the simplified tier structure that we were proposing.
I might have had it if I saw this ahead of time,
I apologize.
but I'm seeing it now, and we're definitely going to need a copy because I'm trying to analyze this
Sure.
while I'm looking at the glare that's going across section. So, yeah,
Okay.
I'd like to, at least for me, I want to look at it in a lot more detail, highlight it and that sort of thing.
Okay. So our recommendations for the city are to implement that simplified rate structure, along with one of the proposed rate increase options. And then again, because we're seeing a deficit in fiscal year 2027, we recommend that you continue, excuse me, reviewing revenues and expenses on an annual basis or a semi-annual basis in the event that further rate adjustments are needed. Do you have any
Anything?
questions? I'm done.
Any questions from council?
I had some questions about the the tiers, if you could go back
Sure.
and just kind of compare them. So, and I know I guess my first question is regarding the current ones, and I don't want to shoot the messenger because you're just the messenger on this. You didn't, I don't believe this was y'all's recommendation, but I mean, on the non-residential side, two questions. On the commercial and the tier 2, I mean, that is a significant gap between 5,000 and 27,000. And I think even in the recommendation, I mean, you still have a gap between 5 and 20,000. I mean, someone who's using 4 times as much as their neighboring user in water is still paying the same rate. And I didn't know, I mean, is there any consideration as to breaking up those tiers a little bit more to account for, the person, I mean, someone using 5,001 or 2,000 gallons of water is paying the same rate as someone using 20,000 gallons of water. I mean, is there...
I think that is definitely something that we could develop. I know that the usage was pretty wide for the commercial customers between, I think the average was 20,000 gallons.
Okay.
But we saw a lot of varying usage for the commercial customers, but I don't think that it would be ludicrous, for instance, to develop 4 different tiers and make that allotment, the volume allotment for each tier a little bit closer together.
Right, okay. And then I guess, so the current structure for the commercial side, again, has all these factors in it depending on the water meter size. Again, I'm not trying to shoot the messenger, but what would be the rationale in having that structure like that? I mean, why would we have done that? Maybe that's a John question back there, but have you ever seen that before? And what's the...
I
Like,
personally haven't. I'm not sure if Mark
Yeah.
might have.
I don't know that I've seen it set up that way with also an increasing amount with the base charge based on meter size.
Okay.
Usually it's kind of one way or the other. I'm not sure I could explain it to the maybe to satisfy you.
Sure.
But that was part of the reason when we saw that we were going to kind of recommend a simplification, because it gets overly complicated, and in some scenario, you know, the guy with the bigger meter size is somehow getting a cheaper
Right.
water bill and stuff,
Yeah.
and it maybe isn't as consistent as some of the other tiers and rates seem to be, and what I think y'all's goal is when setting rates. So that was kind of our simplification, as far as explaining why it was done that way, I'm not sure.
Well, I don't think that John was involved in setting any of these. I think these were predating John.
Sure, right,
So
yeah.
It was from a.
I just mentioned John just because I would have, maybe he had some institutional knowledge on it, on how we got here, but I'm not trying to put him on the spot, but.
Well, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, come on up to the mic.
Historically, it's been my understanding that the assumption is that with those meter size, the volume of water used would be substantially more. And the issue is then when they're not using substantially more water, they're getting the tier 1 rate
Right,
as
okay,
opposed to what they should probably be in tier 2 or tier 3.
okay,
So with the larger meter sizes, and an assumption, alongside an assumption that they will use substantially more, it's almost as though the tier 1 could go away for those larger meter sizes, because the assumption is they're using substantially more, which is why they required a larger meter, obviously. So
I see.
I
Okay.
think
So it
moving
seems
the
like,
rates it almost would have to be a staggered structure, though,
uh-huh,
if that makes sense. But if you're looking at a 6-inch water meter, yeah, the tier 1 is all the way up to 500,000 gallons. Ideally, if they're paying that, they should be in the tier 2 or tier 3 rate at that volume,
right.
right? That's
Yeah.
what
Okay, so I guess there were certain assumptions built in that just did not come to fruition, it sounds like to me, would be,
Yeah, I think so, but also, it's a good question about the 500,000 gallons for a 6-inch meter, being able to pay the tier 1 rate.
right?
I don't have an answer for that.
Okay. And then I guess my last question about this is on the industrial, I think it was mentioned that all industrials pay the tier 1. Is that regardless of volume?
That's correct. And I think we see that with other systems too. They use so much water, and usually there's something in the agreement with
Okay.
that industry that dictates what tier they use.
I
I'm not
see.
sure if that's the case for the city, but that's what we've seen with other systems.
Okay. It definitely looks like, in my opinion, that a simplification is the right move here. I don't, even in the proposed though, I mean, that's a big gap from 5,000 to 20,000. But I guess my next question then would be, I mean, in your analysis, how many customers, if we broke that up to one more tier, 2 more tiers, I mean, is there any value in even doing that? Are there any customers that would actually affect? I don't know, but.
I'm not. We didn't develop a model that had 4 tiers for non-residential, but we could certainly look into if we developed a tier, say between 10,000 and 20,000, how many customers that would capture, how much volume, how many thousands of gallons that would actually affect.
Right.
That's definitely something we could look at.
And I'll just add that you would essentially be looking at then the similar tier structure as the residential, which then it's almost more simplified, because then everybody's on the same tier, whether you're residential or non-residential.
Right.
And you have some simplification there. I will say that the average commercial user, when you go with the arithmetic average, was about 20,000 gallons. However, the majority of your commercial users are still pulling through a 3/4 inch meter, and of those, the average is closer to 4,400 gallons.
Okay.
So the majority of your commercial customers are still going to be in tier 1, even with this new breakout, regardless of meter size.
Okay.
So, And again, kind of, I think Chrissy made the point, the makeup of a commercial business varies pretty greatly. You know, you've got your ones that are coded as an industry that are getting that specific rate, but outside of that, you've got, you know, a gas station that may have a bathroom, and then you've got probably a car wash or something that
Right.
else that's using a significant more amount of water for their business. So we kind of did there were 3 existing tiers for non-residential, so we kind of stuck with the number of
Stuck with
tiers.
that, okay.
But having a 4th tier and making it mimic the residential would definitely also generate revenue at an equal amount or even greater amount, as
Okay.
well as kind of encouraging the water conservation of those commercial businesses.
Right, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Okay, when you say it's increasing the bill by $12, there are some people that use water and it's like a $30 bill. There's some people that use 100 on residential. Well, $12 on 100 is 12%. $12 on 30-something is closer to like 40%. So when you say that, is that a blanket statement? Or are you saying that's an average? Or what is the average bill that $12, so there is a percentage our people can know that this is going to go up? Because the only percentage I heard was 20.
So it depends on which option we're talking about. So we're affecting either the base fee or the consumption charge based on a different percentage. So for example, option 2, we didn't increase the base fee whatsoever. So they could expect a 0% increase on that, right? For the consumption charges, so let's just say your 3/4 inch meter user, residential user, they might use 4,000 gallons. Let me make sure I'm in the right option.
There you go.
So their current water bill is $31.82, and it will increase a little under $4. So again, that percentage is based on their per thousand rate. So it's 20% of that per thousand rate. I couldn't tell you the percentage based on each customer's consumption.
Well, my concern is that the people are going to hear this and they're going to hear 20%, 20%, 20%, and that may not necessarily, I mean, I'll say as a council person, I'm sitting up here and looking at everything, all I heard was 20%.
Right.
So I'm just wanting to clear that up.
Of course.
That, and like I said, the $12 means a whole lot more when you have a $30, $50 bill than when you have a $100 bill.
That one is 11.8% increase for combined water and sewer for an average residential user.
Okay. That's what I wanted to know.
And I
Thank
think-
you. Oh, go
Just
ahead.
to kind of add on, the higher users
Mm-hmm.
are going to see a bigger increase because of how we're adjusting the tier structure as well as the rates themselves. So the higher users are going to see potentially a bigger percentage increase in their bill than somebody that's using, a senior using 2,700 gallons.
Okay, and that's what I wanted cleared up because I didn't think that was really clear when we were going through the whole thing, but that's all I need to know. Thank y'all.
Well, and as we do this and go into the tier structure recommendation by the city or whatever, is the education of the public on this is going to be really important. So as to, I heard this or heard that, people really need to understand what the situation we're in, what we're looking at as far as increases, Douglas County this, Carroll County, and why it's that way with Carroll County. And I don't remember the years now, but let's just say we've been getting a really good deal for a lot of years, because most of us are going to look at that and go, why such a big jump with Carroll County Water Authority? And it's just that. It's like you got locked in with a really good deal for a long time, and all of a sudden, guess what? It's going to change. And it's shocking, right, to people. So the education aspect on the information we put out is going to be so critical. And also, I think with that, it's really important to let people know how you can, save on your water. I'm more than glad to help with that on my part, but I don't have the platform that we can put out all on the city, but I'll use my page and my email list and all to let people know just simple things that you can do, things we changed around our house that make a real difference. Having the kids grow up and move out helps a lot too. So there's various things. You automatically get a discount. It's just great. Sometimes they come back, and it goes back up again for a little while, but as you're getting older and they grow up, that is one nice advantage, like turn that water off. But anyway, okay, so what do we have next? Are we, questions? Yes. Yeah.
Okay, you're saying this is water and sewer increase, so if you're only taking water, you have a septic tank, it'd be half that amount, is that correct?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, a lot of people have septic tanks, they only use water,
I believe it would just reflect the water bill then.
so that would be about half of it. I think the same stuff goes down the sewer, okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chrissy.
Thank you.
I knew Jennifer wasn't here. I figured that out, so, okay.
So, good morning, Mayor and Council.
Good morning.
Amanda Long, Deputy Finance Director. So, based on what Carter and Sloop has provided, staff's recommendation with the rate increase is going to be to go with option number 2. We feel that because it is just the consumption that promotes conservation, which since we're buying so much water, we feel that would be the best option. So the header sheet kind of goes over our reasons. Our Carroll County increased by 78%. Douglas County for this year increased 2.27%. We've also listed all of the debt service requirements, which include the bonds for building the West Plant. $29 million is still owed in principal on that. GFA loans totaling almost $10 million. So that's gonna, in the future, we're still gonna be making those payments. We've also included a list of all the water and sewer projects that are current. And then that totals about $17.5 million planned. So the last section shows the 3 options that Carter and Sloop has recommended. And again, we are going to go with option number 2 as staff's recommendation.
Any questions
Any
from
questions?
council? I like the fact that we'll have, a week to digest this and, excuse me, and network a little more. So I don't want to say exactly where I am, but I know I didn't like option 1. It felt like it gave the least control to citizens, which includes us, to be able to control our bill with conservation or whatever. And if you've got 3-4 kids in the house and everything else, that can be a big bill. So so I've eliminated 1, at least on how I feel about it, but I appreciate the recommendation. Y'all have any other questions
Yeah,
at this point?
I'm in agreement with the staff. I think the consumption increase is the way we ought to go. The more water you use, the more you should have to pay. Thank you.
I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
I don't know why I was thinking this was, I knew this had a public hearing here, but I'm so used to us doing those public hearings right at the beginning before everything else that somehow I was still assuming that's what we were going to do.
We generally
yeah.
do. We do try to do that. We just, because we had guests today, we just wanted to make sure that that presentation was heard as well. We kind of deferred them back from January, so we didn't want to keep pushing them back into March. Wanted to make sure we got everyone's feedback and recommendations so we can move forward on that study.
Okay, so HB 581, the
HB
floating
581.
homestead exemption.
So Diana DeSanto, interim city manager on behalf of Jennifer Holman. So yes, today we're going to talk about the floating homestead exemption and floating local option sales tax, otherwise known as House Bill 581. Once I present, we will open this to a public hearing, so anybody who's from the public will get an opportunity to speak on this today. Just wanted to also mention, I'm not sure, I don't think it's included in the presentation, but there's another one this evening at 6 p.m. and then another one next Tuesday at our regular meeting as well. So again, just some general information on the floating homestead exemption. This would include a potential sales tax flossed to go along with it. And the process moving forward is the council will decide after these 3 public hearings if they want to opt in or opt out, and then that will determine our schedule moving forward. Okay, House Bill 581 was passed by the Georgia General Assembly during the 2024 legislative session and was signed into law by Governor Kemp on April 18th, 2024. In November this past year, there was a statewide referendum that was passed with an effective date on January 1st. And this provides several significant changes that impacts local government revenue. So to dive a little bit deeper into that, this House Bill 581, which implements a statewide floating homestead exemption for all local governments to include counties, cities, and school board. A floating homestead is a special type of homestead exemption designed to offset or reduce increases in taxable value to the property. It is also referred to as a base year or value offset exemption. Freezes are a type of floating homestead exemption, but do not have an annual inflationary adjustment. The House Bill 581 floating homestead exemption is unique because the base year value is adjusted and will increase by a rate of inflation determined by the state revenue commissioner, which at this point we're assuming is likely to be CPI. That's a generalized use of measurable inflation each year. The House Bill 581 floating homestead exemption applies to special service districts in addition to maintenance and operations, otherwise known as M&O, but does not apply to bond millage. So this will include the TAD for us. And just to kind of say that another way, if you have a specific millage rate for debt service like a bond, it would not apply to it. But since we do not have it, it does apply on the TAD for us. Does that make sense?
Real quick, Diana.
Yep,
Though,
I'll go back.
but, I mean, as far as you say apply to the TAD, but this is only for homestead exempted properties. So, I mean, commercial developments in the TAD.
Correct.
And multifamily
Wouldn't-
rentals
wouldn't
would not apply.
Yeah, but it would apply to the residential parcels included with it.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. And there are a significant number there with the new housing development. I mean, agreed, multifamily, but for those homes that aren't quite built yet, there are several planned in the area as well that it would apply to.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. Good point. The effect of House Bill 581's homestead exemption. The taxable value of a home may only increase at a rate of inflation each year. This will essentially control how much of the value of a home can increase annually. Homeowners already granted a homestead will receive this exemption automatically, with 2024 being their base year assessed. For homes first receiving the exemption in later years, the base year assessed value will be the assessed value for the immediately preceding year. The value will be reset when the home is sold and is adjusted with substantial property change. So that would be major addition, probably if you put in a pool, perhaps finished a basement, accessory dwelling unit, something like that would be your substantial property change. Homeowners cannot transfer exemption to new property. And like you just mentioned, Councilman Momtahan, non-homesteaded property, i.e. commercial, will continue to be valued at fair market. So just an example we have here, if in 2024 your fair market value is determined to be $250,000, the 40% assessment of that at $100,000 would be your base year value. So taking a look at that in 2025, your adjustment would be held at $2,000 if your CPI is at 2%, and okay, so that's with your CPI adjusted base value. So then in 2026, you're pulling the 102 over, so it kind of just compiles on top of each other like that, compounding. So your base value in 2026 is then 102. So same with your 2% increase. So your increase is just, again, adjusted at the float. Your float, to make sure you're capturing that difference in increased value, then adjusts the same. So you've got at your 110,000, your floating homestead exemption's now 8 to carry you back up to that 102. So essentially, your float's just increasing by your value increase, so your tax base remains the same. I did not do a good job of explaining that, but I hope I simplified it at the end. Okay, so I believe last time we talked about, Councilman Momtahan, you asked what would that look like, or what would that have looked like in prior years, kind of moving into this year. So if we could go back and say, based on our property makeup of homestead versus non-homestead, what would that cumulative difference have been? So to not read too much numbers, but to just talk about the first column, 40% of property with homestead. So we're just looking at our digest of homestead property, the difference from the prior year. So our percentage increases versus that CPI increase. What our millage rate was in terms of what that provided in revenue, what our new homestead value would be, and then new revenue after that cap adjustment. So our cumulative difference or loss would have been over that 6-year period, a little less than $1 million. So had that been in place, and again, it's kind of hard to go back in time and what it would have been, but I think Jennifer did a good job of trying to draw a picture so that as we're looking forward, what that could mean in terms of potential decrease in revenues.
And I know that's probably about the only way to do it, is looking backwards. School board did the same thing with theirs. The only thing I would like to be clear here, though, is those were also the exact years that inflation spike was going crazy with housing. We had COVID in 2020, and then you saw them when they were just flying off the market. Interest rates were real low and everything else. And so market value on homes were really high, so that this...
Well, and I think she did
yeah.
a good job, too, to your point of trying to capture what CPI was then, because she uses 2% as an example in the previous slide, but CPI was, almost 5%, 8%, 4% for those years. So it is hard to control those costs. Yeah.
Thank you. I didn't want to stop you. Go ahead.
So again, with House Bill 581, there is the option for the creation of a new sales tax called a floating local option sales tax, or FLOST. This authorizes most local governments with the new homestead exemption or equivalent to levy a new sales tax up to 1% to be used for property tax relief if a local FLOST referendum passes. So this would be essentially the funding, that $1 million revenue loss with the creation of that floating homestead. This would be a supplement to that would be paid in a different way, potentially, if passed. To be eligible to levy the tax, both the county and all cities within the county that levy a property tax must have in effect a floating homestead exemption, either the one created by this bill or a local floating homestead exemption. It doesn't matter if the school board opt out or not, since they are ineligible to share in the proceeds of the new sales tax without a separate constitutional amendment. Okay, so they can opt out, and it does not impact the ability to have a flossed. Similar process as lost negotiations, and she says, i.e. IGAs, which are intergovernmental agreements, except floss can only run up to 5 years. Then a new referendum must be called to continue it for another 5 years. If one city opts out, then the county and all of its cities within the county are ineligible for the flossed. Any questions on the flossed portion? So again, just to go over the process, allows local governments to elect to opt out if this homestead exemption within their jurisdiction so that it will not apply to their taxable values. This process could not begin until the bill took effect on January 1st, 2025, and must be completed by March 1st, 2025. A governing authority may not opt out of the statewide floating homestead exemption after the deadline, although there has been some consideration about extending the deadline. However, the local delegation may pass a local act of the General Assembly to implement a local floating homestead exemption at any time. The process for opting out is similar to the millage rate process for advertising and public hearings. 3 public hearings, including one occurring between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. Advertisements of public hearings must appear 1 week prior to each hearing, prominently displayed in no less than 30 square inches, must not be in the section where the legal ads appear, and must be posted on the website 1 week prior to each hearing. Advertisements include specific language and the issuance of a press release to local media. After you've completed all these steps, the local government may then adopt a resolution opting out of the homestead exemption and file with the Secretary of State by March 1st, 2025. Again, this is just kind of steps in the process. So as far as the schedule for the city of Villa Rica, today, February 4th at 10 a.m., we're about to have our first public hearing. We've advertised in the newspaper. We did that 1 week prior, and we've posted notices on the website. We have an additional public hearing to be held this evening at 6 p.m., same location, nothing in advance of, so it will be right at 6. It's been advertised in the paper also a week prior to and posted on our website. And we have one additional third public hearing scheduled for next Tuesday, 6 p.m. That one has also been advertised in the paper. And notices are posted on our website. And at that time is when council will vote on a resolution one way or another for opting out of the homestead exemption. If council elects to opt in, no votes necessary. Questions for me before we open it to a public hearing?
We're ready.
Thank you for bearing with me. That was a last minute
one-
substitution.
At least I
One
thought
question.
we were. Wait a second.
Oops.
Go ahead, Councilman Carter.
Is my understanding, is it in Carroll County that if any of the cities in Carroll County opt out, it's not available to anybody after that?
The flossed. Do you want me to go back to that side? So okay. Let's say we'll pick a city. We'll pick on them. Bowden, because
Yeah, I think one
we'll
of them
we'll
has-
say Bowden because I think they've already said
One
they're
of them has
opting in.
opted out,
So
yeah.
we'll pretend they're let's say they're opting out. What that means is we can still choose to opt in. We just can't then have the flossed on the referendum in the fall as a revenue source to offset the projected 200, 300, and who knows what that number will be next year, right? Whatever that annual loss in revenue is, we can't have that on the ballot in the fall for everyone to approve or disapprove of for the floating local option sales tax.
That option drops off if any city than the county opts
Okay, just that option
out
drops off.
of
You s-
floating
you still-
homestead.
Still could have the floating homestead exemption, but can't have the floss.
Right.
Okay.
Good.
All right, we're going to go ahead and open up for public comment now on the floating homestead exemption. When you come to the microphone, if you'd state your name and address for the record. And you have 3 minutes.
Good morning, Mayor McPherson and council members. My name's Ken Carey. I live at 3330 Echo Falls Court, Villa Rica. My wife Faith and I have been residents of Villa Rica since August of 2001. After moving here from Willow Grove, PA, retiring from the Navy after 20 years. Over the years, I've seen growth, good growth, within Villa Rica. Also, I've seen variable increases and decreases of my house taxes. In 2016, our house was paid off from the hard work done by myself and my wife. This past November, the state of Georgia, as everybody knows, more importantly, the residents of Carroll and Douglas County voted on SB 581 with the combined votes of 75,979 for yes and 48,650 for votes of no, of which is 64% for a win for the residents of these two counties. As of last year, I'm considered a senior, which I hate to admit, so I get the school tax exemption, which is frozen by what I've read and allows for no inflationary increase. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what my wife and I desire, which is one of the reasons why we are still residents here. I'm asking for all of you to vote no on the option of opting out on SB 581. This is what we, the people, voted for. This will not only help the residents of Villa Rica on their house taxes and insurance, but will ensure that not only the current residents remain, but more people will relocate here, providing more dollars flowing into the city coffers. Thank you for your time and consideration on this matter, and God bless you all.
Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Eric Robinson. I am the mayor of the city of Mount Zion. And I just came to speak to this body today, as we see from the presentation, good presentation by the way, that what you choose to do does affect the other municipalities in this county. Bowden, at their January meeting, affirmed their support of the majority of their voters. We intend to do the same at our February 11th city council meeting. And I'm here today to speak to you on this issue for the majority of your voters. I don't know the exact numbers, 62.4% majority out of our poll. And I just want to represent our majority. In this, I believe that y'all may have had a higher majority than that on the Carroll County side, as I heard on the radio. It was a very good presentation, but I would like to question the math. I've been questioning the math. I've seen the math that went to the school board. First of all, there is no realized loss of revenue. If every taxpayer in your digest could take this, there would be no loss of revenue. It would be the same as it was last year, plus one bump, inflationary bump when they take it. According to our tax
Mr. Robinson, I'm sorry, a little closer to the mic.
Okay.
There you go.
According
Thank you.
to our tax commissioner, it's a 1.8, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, initial inflationary bump if they take this exemption. But what I would like to ask about the math that y'all have going back 5 years, what part of your tax digest went into that little short of $1 million? Is it your entire tax digest that they figured that number on? I'm asking this because in our city, I don't know your guys' tax digest, but in our city, it's right at 50% of the people, our residents, would even qualify for this. And just riding through your town, I would say it's less than that for you, because commercial doesn't qualify, rental property doesn't qualify. This only is a homestead exemption for your primary residence. And I just wanted, is that reflected in the math, the 5 years back? That it's only the qualifying people?
We can probably check afterwards, because our chief financial officer that would normally do the presentation is not here, and she put the presentation together.
Okay. But when we go back 5 years, I saw what the math with the school board as well. That is not, that's unrealized loss. That is not a loss. We don't have to pay it back. We don't have to reach in our coffers and pay back the money we collected over the last 5 years. And there's no substantial, there will be no loss of revenue, actually. And I just would like to urge this body to stick with the other municipalities in Carroll County that's trying to make this happen so that we can keep the floss alive. Because, as we can see, I mean, if you're at a 50% or less of your tax digest that would even qualify for this homestead exemption, you're answering the majority of the voters on a referendum. Just what if that line item on the ballot would have passed at that majority and it had a name beside it, and we were trying to overturn it? I mean, I'm just trying to think about all the voters of Carroll County here, not just my voters, and not just y'all's voters. But it was an overwhelming majority to put this line item in, which, what if it would have had a person's name beside that ballot, and we were trying to overturn it like this? That's all I have to say on the matter, but just try to keep the floss alive, because I believe all the municipalities and the county's revenue would increase if we do the will of the people and then institute the floss sales tax. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to? Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor, Council.
Morning.
Greg Roberts, 2142 Burkdale Street, Villa Rica. First, I'll say, I won't be mad at you guys whichever way you go. And the reason I won't be is because there's nothing short of confusion throughout the state amongst municipalities, counties, and particularly school boards. I've listened to a lot of conversation online from other cities. They all have seemingly the same confusion. So on page 7 of the presentation, I agree with Mr. Robinson before me. I'm not sure where those numbers come from, but I'm not saying they're wrong. I don't have any way to say they're wrong. But what I would say, it just further supports what I've been saying for a little bit, that there's a little bit of confusion. But I did vote favorable to House Bill 581 in November, and I agree with Mr. Robinson and the other speaker a moment ago as well. The will of the people did speak, and to opt out would be sort of going against that. But there's no denying the confusion. And so I'm not laying that at the state legislature and the governor's office, but maybe, and maybe this is just for me and it's a little comical thought I had, but they should have done a House Bill 581 for dummies, top 10 questions out there. Somebody should have done that. Honestly, they should have done that. And I've looked for something like that because I connect with being a dummy. But I've just not seen that. And every city and county around the Atlanta metropolitan area in particular sort of has a different spin on it. A lot of them are going to make the decision to opt in based on the voters, but several are opting out. And I guess regardless of how many of them vote, we'll know in a couple of years whether or not who made the right or wrong decision. Then the other question I have, and I have not spent a lot of time, I think I just sat there and come up with this question, and maybe someone here has the answer, but with the city of Villa Rica being seated in Carroll County, but a pretty good portion being in Douglas County, I don't know how that impacts. I would think the city of Villa Rica has leaned heavy on the Villa Rica side and wouldn't be impacted by what cities in Douglas County, because it looks like Douglas County and Douglasville are opting out. I think that's the spirit that I've seen over there. So I don't know that section impacts Villa Rica with it sort of crossing into both county lines. But thank you for your time. And one last time, thank you for switching this meeting. It didn't have to be a week out, but having that thing for 3 or 4 hours and then coming right back to a 6 o'clock meeting, I don't see how y'all did it, and I know the citizens couldn't keep up with it. But thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to speak during the public comment time in regard to the floating homestead exemption?
Good morning, Mayor, City Council
Morning.
members. My name is Alita Dobbs Farmer, representing 216 Anderson Road, Villa Rica, Georgia. In regards to the HB 581 floating homestead exemption, as you know, most of you know that I'm representing Ward 1. And one of the comments that were brought up by Mr. Santo was that it includes the TAD. And I was trying to understand, when you say it includes the TAD, does that mean that the residence, not the commercial property, is eligible for this homestead?
That is correct.
Okay, because that was not clear, so that's why I wanted to make sure. I believe that myself, I did vote for this because I do believe that we as homeowners, we deserve the right to lessen the load of the tax burden when it comes to our homes. My father is fortunate to be a disabled veteran, and he gets 100%. So that for now, that makes sense, but I can only imagine what that would look like if that circumstance change. So I believe we need all this assistance we can get from the city of Villa Rica and Carroll County in regards to tax reduction.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else that would like to speak during public comment time? Going once, going twice. All right. We'll be finished with the comment time. However, we will be back at 6 p.m. this evening for another public hearing.
Okay, I got one more question for Diana here. And that is, as I understand it, if this new floating exemption is a benefit to you, they'll apply it. But if you already have an exemption that's more beneficial, you'll stay with the old one. They're going to apply whichever one's the best for you.
Correct. If the jurisdiction already has one that's more favorable, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Based on the comments, can you say if Douglasville is opting out, what that's going to do to the Douglas County side of Villa Rica
There will be no lost
on
the referendum, so there will be no collections for
Okay.
that portion of our digest, which is getting close to 50%, 40-ish% of our digest comes
Yes.
from Douglas. Go.
I was going to say that I've noticed through this whole thing, and I will say a simple Google search, there is an FAQ on this, is that it's the flossed and the homestead exemption. It's kind of being presented as one, and it's really not. You've got the homestead. It looks like, because everybody voted, we have the homestead exemption. That's going to go through. We're opting out of the flossed, correct?
No. So
Okay.
you're right though. There is this combination, and it's because if you opt out of the homestead exemptions, such as we'll pick on Douglasville, Douglas County, if there's opting out, then we will not have that opportunity for the flossed. So an opt out of the homestead automatically opts you out of the flossed because there is no revenue reduction that you would need the additional sales tax proceeds to help bring back. Does that make sense?
That does. Yeah, to me that does.
Good.
Just to clarify for the counties, though, because Carroll County and Douglas County both have a frozen homestead exemption, which if you're the taxpayer, in most cases, it's going to be more favorable to you than the statewide one. So if they do nothing, they basically just keep the homestead exemption they already have. But my understanding from talking to one of our county commissioners is that, at least on the Carroll County side, I haven't talked to Mark Alcaraz on the Douglas County side, is that the way our tax will be done is they will choose whichever one is most favorable to you when it comes to your county tax.
Yes, I mean, I
But-
honestly can't think of a situation
But one
when
way
a
or another,
freeze
you'll have
wouldn't be more favorable because it's done, you know. The only time I could think would be if there was a negative, which it sounds crazy, but from my prior experience in Cobb County, it actually got really confusing in 10, 11, and 12 because for so long nobody saw any type of an exemption on their bills because their values dropped and dropped and dropped, and you can't have a negative float. So that's the only situation if there was type of a reversal, but I don't see that happening.
Yeah, really rare.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Drummond,
And while we're still on that subject,
who's going to introduce himself as?
Kevin Drummond, City Attorney. While we're still on 581, though, several people have made comments to opt in, but you're automatically in. I mean, there's no process to opt in. You're in unless you take steps to opt out. So,
You have to vote to opt out. If you do nothing, you are in. You're automatically in.
everybody starts in, and you have to take steps to get out. Okay. All right. The next item on the agenda, item 4, are Board of Ethics appointments. Currently, we have 3 vacancies on the Board of Ethics, and the vacancies consist of one appointment that the mayor will appoint, which she's got a name, of someone that's willing to do it. I've talked to that person also. She has a second one that she will appoint, but then the council must approve. She's also talked to someone that's willing to do that, and I've talked to him also. And then there's a third that the council needs to appoint. And I'm not sure if council's discussed, but there needs to be at least one person that the council will approve to sit on this board. We won't take votes today, but that will be the process for. Any questions for me?
I have a question. So once once every appointment's been made, is that when we vote, or do we vote, or is this piecemeal?
Vote on the appointments?
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried, in the cover sheet, you'll see, I've tried to structure the actual votes.
I saw that.
So for one position, there will be no vote at all. The mayor will just announce who that position will be.
Okay.
The one from council, someone would need to make a motion to appoint someone, and then there would be your vote. And on the third position, the mayor would announce who her appointment is, and then someone would need to move to approve that person, and there would be a vote.
Okay.
So there's actually 3 steps there, two of them requiring a vote.
Okay, but my question is, I think I might have misreferenced my question, is that, are we all voting at, I understand the mayor can appoint at any time, but the other two, are we all voting at the same time, or is it, we're gonna vote this meeting, and then maybe we decide to vote for the other one in March, or April, or May, or would you prefer?
I think we need to go ahead and do it at the next meeting.
Okay,
Go ahead and get the board fully staffed, and there's a little work for them to go ahead and start working on, so.
okay. That is what I want to know, thank you.
Yeah, so was there a question, Matthew?
Well, yeah, I did have a question, I guess. So, so I understand you said there's a little work for them to start working on, but would this board would not meet on a monthly basis or weekly basis? I mean, it essentially, it would only meet when there's an application or whatever.
As
complaint,
needed or when
as needed.
required?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
That's
Yes,
right.
As required or as needed, right?
As needed.
Okay.
And I think we should clarify that these appointments will be for a year, because, you know, if they don't meet for a full year, we don't want these, you know.
Sure.
We just need to reappoint every year.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a question, only because I think a lot of people must be thinking this. Okay, so this is our ordinance. This is what we need to do to be in compliance with our ordinances, have this board available, should there be an ethics complaint. If in the future we decide to change this ordinance in some sort of way, can you give us, and you don't need to spend a lot of time on it, do we have an option as to deferring to, I guess you'd call it a more independent, state-level ethics that is kind of outside of us? Does that make sense?
Yes and no is the answer. It depends on the subject. Okay, we've formerly there was a statewide ethics board. They've changed their name. I can't recall
Campaign
yeah,
finance.
that's right.
Yeah,
So
it's campaign
they would deal with-
finance, something or another.
They would deal with things that would fall under the elections law. I mean, all of your ethics boards, including this board's very limited on what they can consider and what their powers are. They're a recommending body, just like many of our other boards. So if an ethics complaint comes before this body, our ordinance spells out what are the ethics violations that they can consider, and then they would make a recommendation that comes back before this body to determine whether or not an ethics violation occurred. So you have to ask yourself, if the ethics complaint's made against a council member, and the council's going to ultimately decide whether an ethics violation occurred, I mean, is that giving confidence, does the public feel confident in that process? And I don't know that they would or should. There's nothing that prevents, if someone thinks something illegal has happened, there's there's nothing that prevents them from other remedies under state law. There's no requirement that you go through this ethics board for anything. I think that's why there have not been ethics complaints in the past, because if there have been violations of state law, there's other paths to take and other remedies, so.
Well, and I'm aware of that just because in a nearby government entity where something did occur, and I don't know exactly how they addressed it in the very beginning, but it ended up at the state level with the governor appointing, like interim, what do you call that? Temporary positions, interim, while it got resolved. And the governor did the appointments. So I don't know the process of who it went to first, but I know that's where it ended up.
I think in that situation, there was probably a criminal prosecution.
Yeah.
And if there's especially if there's a criminal conviction, then the governor would step in.
Yeah, there were actually charges filed or whatever, and so it would, okay. So that there, I think people need to understand that there are other sources of accountability as well, but, okay.
And
that was my question.
If you look at our ordinance, you're all familiar with GMA puts out model ordinances, and GMA has a City of Ethics recognition that was big several years back, and this was their model ordinance, and they required you to adopt that to become a City of Ethics. I think just talking to attorneys that represent other cities, this is a feel-good type of thing that provides little, if any, benefit to the citizens or to the city itself. But we adopted it, it's there, so we need to fill it and at least take care of what we need to take care of at this point. But whether it has any teeth or provides any anything that would make citizens feel good that their complaints are being heard, I really don't know that it does.
So maybe that's something on one of our all-day work days is something we can talk about, because to be honest, it really was when I saw the GMA ordinance, and you can be a city of ethics, and basically it's almost like you put up a banner that you are, but there's nothing to show that you are for sure, because I was watching some of those same cities on, WSB on the news station with with ethics problems. So just saying you are doesn't mean anything. And so I'm just looking, I think, for a little bit more independence, and maybe that's where some of your comments in regard to legalities, where there is another avenue, because you really feel like there needs to be something independent from us that's seen as more separate, so people feel like it's getting looked at in a non-biased way. But anyway, that's all.
Yeah, and I just hope someone on council can come up with one name that everyone could agree on that could sit on this committee. So. Any more on that subject? All right.
Good, thank you.
All right. On item number 5 is a resolution enacting a moratorium for 180 days on all new construction. I think the actual draft of the moratorium was sent out with a package, but this would
Hang on.
This would enact a moratorium for 6 months, 180 days, on any new construction within the city, unless it falls within a narrow class of exceptions. Those are basically public safety or health type issues, or projects that would actually increase the sewer capacity for the city. Of course, I'm not an engineer, but it's been explained to me that we're at a juncture now that we really need to take a deep, close look at what's been approved and our sewer capacity, both for treating and getting the sewage where it needs to go to be treated. If there's any specific questions about the actual infrastructure, Mr. Bain, I think, can answer. Yes, he didn't skip out on me. He's still here. But that's what this moratorium does. And it gives us time to go through the EPA hopefully we get an answer from EPD on proposals to increase capacity, and fix some of the problems that we have.
One thing I want to make sure that at least we take note of, because I was looking for this, because I think we're going to have, people that are going, oh, good, we can catch our breath and really see where we are, and if we can get this approval from EPD so that we have the utility capacity to deal with the growth we've had and growth that could continue. But to relieve some people that also, this does not, let's make it clear, this does not impact anything that's already been approved.
That's
Does
correct.
that need to be said more specifically?
That's correct. This would prevent new applications from being considered. So if there's an application already being considered or already approved, it's going through the process, but it would put the brakes on new projects.
Okay, and the only other, we have a lot of people out sick, so I have a few questions for some other things, but I'll just ask those during the week as people get back into work. The only other thing I want to make sure we take note of, and that's out of Section 3B, it does say during the term of this moratorium, any person may file an application for exemption from this moratorium with the city, and then I won't read all that, but it will be evaluated. There might be a situation where someone is, I don't know, partially approved, or they've done something. There's going to be a little bit of wiggle room. Do you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, I would say, and Kevin touched on why this is needed, and John can go into a deeper dive if needed at this time. But let's say there was an opportunity or a project that came forward that did not need sewer capacity. It wasn't related, but they did need a permit. That would be an example of one.
Or if someone thought they had vested rights to go ahead with a project for whatever reason, we would evaluate that to determine whether we agreed that they had vested rights. And there'd be
And this is more specific about talking about documentation and things that you would put forward to argue your case, in a sense.
That's right.
Okay. Any questions?
Well, Mayor, I know we've spoken about this, kind of this capacity issue and all that, but if we could have John kind of give us a nutshell briefing of what's going on, because, we're not talking necessarily about we've talked about the capacity issue in different contexts before, but maybe we can maybe he could just kind of tell us what's going on, I guess, or for the public's sake, at a minimum.
Sure. Understand why we're doing this.
Right.
Sure, thank you. So we had been tracking for some time the growth in the city with the new developments and our existing capacity at both our water treatment plant and both of our wastewater treatment facilities. As we talked earlier during the rate study, we talked about purchasing water. As we know, we are somewhat limited in the production of our drinking water due to our existing water treatment facility. So as an example, on the drinking water side, the city's demand in 2021 was about 1.8 million gallons a day. Of that, we produced about 1.3. We purchased around 600,000 gallons a day, or about 35% of our drinking water was purchased. Last year, in 2024, our demand was nearly 2.3 million gallons a day, meaning we purchased 1 million gallons a day, or 45% of our drinking water. Looking ahead, we did a look ahead for each of the next 5 years, 25 through 29, and we are projected right now to, in 2029, purchase nearly 3 million gallons, or demand will be 3 million gallons a day, us still producing 1.3 million, which means we need to purchase 1.6 million gallons a day, or 56% of our drinking water. So really the reverse of producing 65% of our drinking water to only producing 45% of our drinking water, because the demand has gone up so much. And at least that's what we're tracking right now, based on what's going in the ground today, or has been approved or in some form or fashion. Excuse me, I'm sorry. On the wastewater side, as you know, we have two plants. We have the west plant that we can do about 2 million gallons a day. We have the north plant that does about 500,000 gallons a day of wastewater, is where we're at. So in 2021, the west plant was just under 50% capacity. We had about 50% available capacity at the west plant. The north plant, we had about 20% available capacity. In 24, we were up over 60% capacity at the west plant, so we had about 40% capacity available at the west plant. And we're at 86% capacity at the north plant. Again, looking ahead through this year and the next 2 years, we believe in 2027, we will be at 103% capacity at the west plant, and we will be at 90% capacity at the north plant. So we're essentially, today, based on what's been approved, are going to exceed the capacity at our west wastewater treatment facility, and we will be at capacity at the north plant. So now is a time where we've requested from EPD options for plant expansions, for increased discharge locations, because that really is a big part of it. We know we can increase the plant at the west plant. We know we can increase treatment capacity. The question is, where can we discharge that to? So we've asked for answers on that side. So, I'm sorry. So we know we're at capacity, or we will be at capacity based on the list of current projects that we have approved in some form or fashion. They're in some phase of engineering, design, or construction. And this isn't all-inclusive either. There's 8 or 9 projects that we're waiting on more data for, where we get more flows. We know our numbers are going to be up, but we believe in a couple of years we will be about 100,000 gallons a day over capacity at the west plant, and we will be at capacity at the north plant. So we've been working with EPD over the last several months for a resolution on that. Like I said, on plant expansion and on discharge of the facilities, where we can discharge that to. Until my thought has been for some time, I know we've talked about this, is until we have some answers in place and a roadmap that we're looking at as to what our solutions are and how long it's going to take to get there to increase our capacity, it seems to me it would be prudent to slow down on new projects until we at least know how long it'll be until we have this capacity. And I don't think that's to say we're in this position for 3 years if it's a 3-year project. This means we have to time it appropriately so our approvals, design, and construction to increase capacity aligns with what's going in the ground today. When we get that aligned, we're okay then at that point. Because by the time some of these projects are online, we will have the available capacity. But we just need to get some answers prior to that, because those answers will tell us how long it'll be, and because it'll tell us what we need to do to increase capacity at the facilities, which we don't know today because we don't have an answer yet. So we've applied for some approvals, we've applied for some waste load allocations back late of 24. Generally, that process is 4 to 6 months to get those answers. We're looking at other options that we can do to improve our capacity and increase that process a little bit, but it's still going to be some time frame to get there. It's not flipping a switch. It's going to be design, approvals from the state, putting projects out for bid, getting the projects bid, getting the construction started. So it's not a short-term solution, but again, once we have a roadmap where we know how long it'll be until we're at an increased capacity, then I think everything will start aligning up pretty well at that point.
John, did
That
this
was
take
really
in-
helpful, by the way. That really needed to be said so people would understand.
John, did this take into account the redirection of some of the sewage that we are sending back to the west plant?
Yes, sir, it does. It takes into account the redirection of Shoreline Lift Station for 2025, which is why there's a spike in treatment at the west plant and a little bit of a reduction at the north plant short term. But with the growth that's taking place over on the Douglas County side, with some residential developments going on, that's going to pick back up and will still be a capacity at the north plant. But it does take that into account, yes.
And that was one of my questions, I guess. Basically, how do we go from 50% to, projecting over 100% in 2 years? But that's because of the redirection.
Yeah, it has something to do with redirection, and then a lot of the construction growth we're looking at today, the vast majority of that is going to the west plant.
And is that appears from anecdotal evidence, at least, that it's mostly residential construction. Do you agree, John, or do you know?
Oh, yeah, the majority is residential, but there are a lot of commercial projects as well. I would say the majority of the flow is certainly residential.
Okay.
Yes, but looking at the west plant, we know we averaged about 1.24 million gallons a day at the west plant last year. We know at the end of this year, we'll be at 1.5 million gallons a day. And then 1.7 million gallons a day at the end of 26.
Okay.
Based on what's being constructed today. So what we did is we took all the construction projects. We calculated the water demand for each of those projects based on single family, townhomes, apartments, commercial. We calculated the amount of water needs. And then on the sewer side, based on that location, we looked at our infrastructure and made the determination which plant that's going to flow to. So we did those calculations, which has helped me get to these numbers. And we also have plugged in here the times these projects are going to be completed. So we know by looking at this list of construction projects that we have, for each of these projects, we have X amount of water demand and X amount of sewer demand, and which sewer plant does that go to. And that's how I developed these numbers, just based on what's been approved today.
Yeah, and I know when we've known that we were going to do a redirect and that there was more capacity at the west plant. What we didn't know till probably July or slightly later was how critical it was. And then it became more of an emergency because we realized that not only did we need to redirect because there was more capacity, but the north plant could possibly be in trouble if we didn't do that, or would be in trouble if we didn't do that redirect. And we've got, a number of things we're looking at that are growing over on the Douglas County side.
Mayor, I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead,
Kind of to
Councilman
your point,
Mompan.
though, I guess, how did we get here? I mean, why did we not, what happened? I know we did the redirect, and then all of a sudden, I guess it was in July, like the mayor mentioned, do we just not know this was, how did we get to this emergency situation is kind of what I'm saying. Like, did we not?
Well,
because I know we've been growing a lot in Villa Rica, a lot of residential growth.
I see
get
Ms.
that.
DeSantis reaching for her microphone.
But I guess I'm saying is like, did we?
Because I don't want John to have to
But we've
answer that
got to
question.
this, we got to this boiling point, and it seemed kind of sudden and out of the blue.
I can tell you why.
And so I can't speak pre-July because
Okay.
of my tenure here, but what I can say that I've heard, and I think it's fair because I've heard it a lot of times, is I don't know that the right people were always at the same table at the same time. And I know for a fact the team has done an amazing job, at least since July, of working together. And if it's before, I don't mean to take that away from the team at all, of working together and communicating and having that project list and understanding exactly what's coming, what phase it's at, and adding John to that conversation so that he can track those flows, exactly what he was talking about with his calculation of the type of residential. If we get updates from the developer of, my financing is not quite there yet, or we're breaking ground here, it can move up or down on that timeline when he's looking at 25, 26, and 27. And I just don't know that those conversations were had among the people doing the day-to-day work prior to July. Perhaps, but I don't think so.
Okay. If I may, I guess my concern is we've experienced a tremendous amount of residential growth in the since 2017, 2020. And constituents and citizens are out there and they're clamoring and they're like, okay, we have all these people here. But where are the restaurants and the retail? And we've been told, well, we need rooftops. Well, we got plenty of rooftops now. And there are other factors in the economy dealing with interest rates, and those all may be a factor. But we've heard for the last couple of years now about multiple rumors about different restaurants and retail opportunities possibly coming to Villa Rica, and for whatever reason, they have not developed yet, or they moved on for whatever their metrics may be. And I guess my concern is, as we come into the spring, and who knows what the overall national economy is going to do, but if we're going to do 6 months in the spring and the summer, which is typically your prime building time, that we may lose out yet again on potential retail and restaurant facilities or developments that, frankly, our citizens have been asking for multiple times. We've heard the rumors about the Longhorn and the Tractor Supply, and I think I heard a rumor of Panda Express and the Texas Roadhouse. And multiple of these, for whatever reason, they moved on, for whatever their reasons may be. And I guess I'm concerned is that we're adding another reason for them to, well, Villa Rica's got this moratorium in place. We can't develop any commercial here, so we're going to move down the road to somewhere else, and then that's going to be another opportunity lost for our city. That's my concern right now.
No, that's a valid concern, and one of the things that we're trying to do as a team is really work with the DDA and promote our downtown and promote those existing buildings that have sewer capacity available to them, and get those buildings filled, get those buildings up to date. It's again, I understand it's not an ideal situation, and certainly the concerns about limiting new construction around this time. I think from a mitigated risk standpoint, I would strongly suggest we look at this, and if there is something that would provide an exemption, it's something we could look at, but we just have to be very careful as we track forward on this, because planning in this type of situation is critical to our future.
I guess, sorry, is there some way we can modify this to where it's not affecting commercial or something of that nature? I guess that's my thing. Because I understand Main Street, downtown, DDA, but there's just certain developments that are not going to be in a downtown area. I mean, you're not going to get a Tractor Supply downtown. You're not going to get a Longhorn downtown. I mean, and downtown is where, honestly, we don't want those national brands. We want local brands, because that's what makes a great downtown, is your character. So not knocking what those efforts are for trying to revitalize downtown and use our existing infrastructure, but I think that still kind of, it doesn't assist kind of with my overall point, is that I don't want to, when so-and-so restaurant or retail decides to pass up on Villa Rica and they go to another place over these next 6 months, that's not coming back, or it may not come back for another decade, something like that. And then the other element too is, we're talking about something that's going to happen 3 years down the road, and I know that every moment and every month is urgent, but I'm like 6 months. I mean, are we really expecting EPA, EPD to get back to us in these next 6 months? I mean, I know there was one thing that we applied for, and I want to say it was IPR, but we applied for that years ago, and they still haven't got back to us. I mean, do we have any actual firm, timeline on that? Because I guess in 6 months, I don't want to come back and say we got to do 6 more months, because we still haven't heard from EPA, EPD, for example.
The question oftentimes dictates the response time from them. For something like a waste load allocation, they have to do modeling throughout the area. And that typically takes 4 to 6 months to do the modeling for the waste load allocations. That's where, when I would mention 6 months, that's what I was referring to. Requesting an expansion in treatment capacity usually does not take that long. We expect to have an answer back more quickly than that 6 month period. The question there is just discharge location, which we're looking at options where we can audit our discharge location and expedite that process a little bit as well. So I think with EPD, it just really depends on what you're asking them to do. I know with the waste load allocations, it takes a while for them to do that, and I don't expect to get an answer back prior to 6 months for that, but I think 6 months is reasonable for that. IPR that you mentioned, is still in the state a relatively new subject that they have been hesitant to give us any answer on. So that's taken us some time to get a favorable response on the IPR. But on treatment plant expansion, modifying of a permit, those usually are quicker turnaround times. Those might be 3 months turnaround time. I would say 3 to 4 months would be safe.
Okay.
And, you know, what I've mentioned before is I'm just trying to share the data that I
Right.
currently have today. We know we do calculations every day at both treatment facilities at the water plant. We do multiple tests and we record our flows every day. We know what we have coming in every day for the past several years. We know the growth that's taking place. We know where that growth, which plant that's going to. And I'm just trying to share the data and what the data tells me. Do you know what I mean? That's
Right, no,
really what I'm trying
absolutely.
to do is
Yeah.
share. And based on where we are, you know, my viewpoint has been, let's get an answer from the state on how we can move forward to increase our available capacity. And then at that point, we all know if it's a 2-year timeline or 2.5-year timeline or a 3-year timeline, because some of these projects may be 3 years, as you mentioned, 3 years down the road. But if we have an answer, say we have an answer in June, and we know we can have increased capacity in 30 months, then I think that answers a lot of questions for us.
Right.
You
Okay.
know, I guess I'm just
Yeah, no,
strictly looking
I
at it from a data
understand.
standpoint.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, John.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, does this answer from the state include our desire to discharge into put a pipeline to discharge into a lake above Villa Rica?
That is one of their requests. We have made 4 different requests at 3 different flow rates each. And that's the modeling that will take 4 to 6 months. But we have also recently requested an expansion in treatment at one of our facilities, independent of discharge. And we have previously requested and got tentative approval for expansion of our north wastewater plant. So we reached out just to confirm with the state that we're still good to move forward in that regard as well.
Okay, have you given any thought to expanding the west plant, because it was designed to be doubled?
That's much of what we're discussing is relative to the west plant. The north plant is we had essentially received a favorable waste load allocation for expanding the north plant. But previously, that hadn't been acted on. We hadn't acted on that. That was a couple years back, I believe. So when we started discussions about IPR is when that conversation was had. So now we're asking for expansions at the west plant and discharge locations, waste load allocations for the west plant. So that's what we're heavily involved with now. And we know we can increase it as an example, from 2 to 3 million gallons a day without too much trouble, because a lot of the infrastructure is already in place. And then if we were to go to 4 MGD, to double it, as you mentioned, it takes a little more, and the discharge becomes a little more questionable as to where we can discharge that volume.
Yeah, the original design of that plant was so that we could double the size of it, put another circulation tank in and all that. 'Cause
yes.
that's the way it was designed.
We can essentially double the size. The question is, where can we discharge it? Because we can't discharge it where we're currently discharging
Right,
it.
I agree. Okay.
So we can increase the plant, but we can't discharge any more
Unless
than we
they give
currently
us-
are. We're at a current discharge point, so we have to find new discharge points.
Unless they give us permission to discharge at another location.
Yes, and that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
So we're just trying to get a roadmap laid out as what we can do.
So, listen, for the sake of meeting time, otherwise, I just say, we still have some time before Tuesday to ask these questions, either by email or phone call, but if you want to ask something now, but just for the sake of trying to move the meeting along. Okay.
I totally agree with you on that, but this isn't really something that can go in an email, and I hate y'all know how staff, I hate kind of being mean to y'all, so please, I apologize in advance. But if, and nothing, and I believe what Diana said about prior to July and everything, that's not my point. But ever since I've sat in this seat, that shoreline pump has been brought up. I bet we could go back to multiple meetings where Tom has brought up, or whoever was sitting in the city manager position has brought up that shoreline pump over. Maybe it just, the straw broke the camel's back or whatever in July. But I know this has been over multiple city managers, this has been sitting on their to-do list. And maybe it is an issue of getting the right people to the right point. But that lift station has been mentioned, I know, multiple times over the last 2 or 3 years. And on that point, piggybacking on to Matthew's, is about the lull in not just residential but commercial. How long are we think it's going to take for the EPA to give us an answer? Because 6 months for the EPA sounds really quick.
Yeah, again, we started asking questions some time ago. We submitted a formal request on wastewater allocations towards the end of last year. Their reply towards the end of last year was 4 to 6 months for modeling. Now that puts us to May, we'll say, April, May area. On the other request, they said they could probably have something to us, I would say 60 days to 90 days for that. But that is just a request to expand the plant itself. As Mr. Carter mentioned, it's relatively easy to expand. The question is where to discharge it to. So that it's a matter of sometime between now and, I would say, I agree, EPD sometimes doesn't give us responses in the timely manner that we want. But I would think sometime between now and, let's get close to summertime, we're going to have a much better understanding of what our options are. And if I may, regarding shoreline, shoreline, I know the shoreline lift station was previously designed as a new lift station in a new force main in a new location. Then, at some point, it was determined, due to expedite the process, we were going to keep the same lift station in the same location, just relocate the force main. That work is essentially done. We have a few more things to wrap up on it. The construction is essentially done. We have to do some work on the receiving lift station that is going into, so it can divert that flow off of the north plant and onto the west plant. But we have time in terms of the data. We have time for that. That's not. I don't see that as a major concern at this time right now, based on the numbers I'm looking at.
Okay, I just want to know. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to B1, Northwoods Phase 2, final
Is
plan.
this a consent item,
Oh,
this resolution?
Yeah, I would object to making it consent.
yeah, I mean, that's kind of a heavy-duty topic. A lot of time, the consent items are not major impact items, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, okay. B, Building Development Northwoods Phase 2, Mr. Elliott.
How's everybody?
We're pretty good, thank you. And your title is?
Bobby Elliott, Interim Deputy City Manager.
See, that's the new part.
It's good to be back.
Welcome back.
These two items, speaking of water and sewer capacities for these two items were issued many months ago. These are the next two pods. I guess we can call them pods. That's how we called them when we revised the PUD zoning map. Or the next two in the development of what's left in Mirror Lake. The big colored map that you see, I don't know if you can see it or not, but Ben, do you have a pointer? Anyway, Northwoods 2 was started to be developed back in 05, 06, and the downturn happened, and it sat dormant until it was picked back up and finished. The Northwoods in the revised zoning, overall zoning map of the PUD back in August of 21, it was zoned for 119 lots, but they only built 105. So they increased the size a little bit based on the minimums. On the agenda cover sheet, I just gave you just a little window of what the zoning conditions are, and the zoning conditions are on the plat. They're on the cover sheet. The plat also has all of the Mirror Lake covenants. You have to have a magnifying glass to read them, but they went ahead and put them on there.
I didn't even attempt.
Yeah,
to read
anyway,
Couldn't.
not on that size, you can't, but if they plot it 24 by 36, full size, you can, with a magnifying glass, you can read it.
And that's just the deed book page references. That's not even the full covenants. That's just the.
Yeah, I know, I know.
Gosh.
But anyway, on a final plat, before we get to this point, several things have to be done. After construction drawings are approved and land disturbance permits are issued, they start grading streets and, installing all the infrastructure, water, sewer, storm, curbs, sidewalks are usually done at building permit time. But all the construction in Northwoods 2 has been duly installed by the city's development regulations and inspected by us. Once that is done, they have to pay a plan review fee to review the final plat for content, to make sure it's got everything on it that the preliminary plat showed and the zoning conditions and that kind of thing. And then they have to post a maintenance bond. The maintenance bond is based on 25% of the actual development cost, the total development cost. And Northwoods 2 is probably one of the biggest maintenance bonds I ever calculated. It's $1.2 million. They have not posted that bond yet, but it will be in our hands on the 7th of this month. So, that being the case, they also have to pay the monthly streetlight fees for a year in advance. That comes to us, plus being in Mirror Lake. Everybody knows by now, I guess, they're buying their new street signs from the city. We're requiring the developer to do the same, to keep everything uniform, so they have to pay street sign fees as well. All that has been done except for the maintenance bond on Northwoods. We'll have it before the regular meeting. But other than that, staff is recommending approval on this plat.
Any questions? Final plat doesn't require a public hearing. We can make this a consent item. Is anyone opposed to making this a consent item? Okay, that'll be consent item number 1.
And one thing I forgot, we have forwarded these final plats, this one and the next one on the agenda, to the Mirror Lake HOA just for their information, so they can look at it.
Okay.
I committed to them that we would do that, and that's what we've been doing, so.
Thank you. All right, number 2, Fairway 16, final plat.
It's basically another pod that's, actually it's on the east side of Mirror Lake Parkway. And there's one right across the street, which is called Fairway 17, which will be coming at the next council meeting. Pretty much everything that I said on the first one applies here as well. This one is 100% complete. We have everything that we need on this one right now. So we recommend approval on it. Like I say, this one also has all the zoning conditions. They went ahead and tried to copy all the covenants and everything else on it too. I mean, but anyway.
But those bonds are really important because back in the other crash, the bonds weren't always there and things were left unfinished in neighborhoods. Roads weren't topped, sidewalks weren't finished. So
Well,
I am just so happy to see that we're doing all those things right.
Actually, back then, we were accepting what is called an irrevocable letter of credit on a local bank. Well, back in '07, banks went under.
Yeah.
If the bank goes under, your bond goes with it. And now we won't accept anything but a bond.
Yep.
That way it's safe. But the bond on 16 is a little bit less, just in case you're interested.
That's okay if we're good.
The bond
I
is
mean, if you're good with it, we're good with it.
273,000 is the
Anyone
bond on
opposed to
16.
making this a consent item?
I do have one question. I'm sorry.
Okay,
just
question?
Just curiosity, because I was looking at the steps on this one.
Tell them I'm trying to catch up a little bit.
I'm sorry. So it looks like there's different minimum lot widths for if it's age targeted or not age targeted, and I see all the minimum lots in here are above 60. So does that tell me that they did not go with age targeted on this portion? Or do you know, Bobby?
We won't know what that split's going to be until they start pulling permits.
Okay.
But I do know for just information, I believe that D.R. Horton is going to buy these lots.
Okay.
So, but we will look at that to be sure that zoning condition is intact when they come in and start.
Yeah, I mean, I see, like I said, I see, looks like every lot width is 60 feet. So that, they would have to done 50 feet. They
Yeah.
could have done 50 feet if they went age
They
targeted.
they just kept them all the
60.
same width.
Okay. I was just curious. Thank you.
Anything else? Anyone opposed to making this consent item number 2?
Nope.
All right, that'll be 2. Number 3, thanks, Bobby. Number 3, downtown gym floor installation. It's not Mr. Griffin, but it is Mr. Jarvis.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Tracy Jarvis, Building Development Director. Nick is out with the flu, so I am presenting this item.
It's
So
everywhere. I mean, I just keep hearing about people sick everywhere.
Can you? Oh,
Yeah, no, go. You're good.
I'm healthy. So far, so good. Anyway, we're coming here requesting approval to engage with Play on Courts Southeast for the gym floor at 206 North Avenue, which we're calling the downtown gym at this time. We've requesting to have us engage with them. They're going to remove the carpet, scrape the glue, diamond grind, scrape the remaining adhesive off, shot blast the existing concrete slab, getting it prepared, furnish and install a 7+2 7mm shock pad and 2mm urethane pad and pour system. The reason we're going with a 7+2 is to engage in all the sports that we're wanting to do there, like pickleball, basketball, volleyball. You got to have that right amount of bounce, especially for pickleball. And if you go too high on the pad part of this pad and pour system, then you don't get bounce for your pickleball. So this is the preferred medium to have these multi-sports gym floors. We're going to do 3-color service colors and a half-court logo, paint lines for basketball court, and 1 color in the volleyball and pickleball courts. In the other, we'll get 3 pickleball courts out of this, 1 volleyball and 1 basketball court. We're going to furnish and install new metal thresholds at the 12 perimeter doors, and we're engaging with them to do the in-floor volleyball sleeves, so you don't have to roll out the old metal ones, and furnish a Porter Power Rib volleyball system with poles, pads, net, and so forth. So the background is the City Council has approved a budget of $95,000 for this project. Staff has reached out to Sourcewell for a vendor who holds a state contract and perform this type of project. Connor Sports holds a current state contractor as a vendor, and Connor Sports has met all the prerequisites and requirements to hold such a contract.
I like the variety of sports that we can play in that one location, by the way
Right.
y'all are lining it and everything else. I didn't know about the padding till you explained that. But also, I understand from the documents that we may even save some money depending on how the floor comes up with the glue and all. So it could be even less than what they're saying it's going to be. So that would be a nice perk if that floor comes up well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually engaged with two different vendors in this area, and this vendor beat the other state approved vendor by about $8,000. So
Yeah, that's good.
You say
Any
this-
questions?
Was this put out for bid, or did you just select play on courts?
So we had, when we were doing the initial, before we even bought the gym, we went out and asked for bids of what these floors would cost. We got several bids then, but we went through Sourcewell, and I can have Louise explain how that works, because I'm not that familiar with it. Yeah, if you would do that, kind of explain that, because it's a real good system to find state contract holders and the best prices.
Yes, I'm Louise Clark, Purchasing Director. Sourcewell is a government organization who is been in business over 40 years. And what they do, they offer a contract solution. They, in essence, do our bidding for us. They'll do nationwide solicitation for contracts and do the whole bidding process. And back in 2022, that's what we are trying to contract. We are trying to like piggyback off of their contract for athletic services. They did a bid back in 2024 nationwide and came up and awarded contracts for the best pricing to install and furnish the floorings for athletic surfaces. So that's what we're trying to do. They do the process, the whole bid process like we normally would do. And they, excuse me, so it's been a competitive process. They did the work. They put the bid out, advertised it, had a committee solicited and awarded the bid. And through the cooperative purchasing agreements, we would like to utilize their contract, in which it would save us money. That's the purpose of it. And they are out, they provide this service for government agencies and education institutions as a way to provide a more.
Obviously, there has to be some sort of fee.
No, we, as a government agency, pay no fee to participate as a member.
Like that, okay.
It's kind of like our
That's what
state contract. How we
Okay.
have awarded state contracts, it's the same thing. We don't pay to be part of it, but we can utilize the state contracts.
And I'm
that are- the
guessing they're going nationwide. They have the resources to be able to
Right.
go places that we tended not to do.
Yes, and I mean,
Like
I looked at their
wider
bid,
search.
their bid was thick, it was very detailed, laid out, what they asked, and they priced everything out, like the type of flooring. So Nick was able to look at it and select the floor and have an estimate what the price would be.
I see. Questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And one of the things that Sourcewell does too is they break down our country into zones. What cost would be in zone 1, 2, or 3, and what the average cost is for that. So the minimum cost this would have been around $108,000 at the average cost in the zone that we're in. So they really do a phenomenal job of getting us the best prices. And Connor Sports, which there's limited companies that does the pad and pour throughout the nation, and Connor Sports is one of the biggest, reputable work at
Okay.
University of West Georgia. So really a top line, and Play On Courts is one of their installers. They're actually the ones that put the new basketball goals in the gym at 206
So
North Avenue.
they operate nationally, but they have their approved installers,
Yes,
just like
so-
you do with things sometimes that you do at home.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And
When you
Play On
purchase from a
Courts has
company.
Kind of got their southeast division here, all the way out to the.
Okay, well, as budgeted, it was able to come in under the cost that was expected. If there aren't any questions, Anyone opposed to making this consent item number 3? No. Okay, that'll be 3. Thank you, Mr. Jarvis.
Thank you all very much.
Human Resources, Miss Lanford. Going to get the last name right.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Tiffany Lamford, HR Director. Apologize for my voice. I'm getting over a cold. This is intended to just be a placeholder for the moment. We are about to the end of our RFQ process for insurance broker services. We put it out on November 25th, and it closed on January 10th. We received a total of 19 submissions. However, 2 were after the deadline, so only 17 were eligible. 4 staff members have reviewed all 17 and ranked them on a scoring process, and those 3 highest ranked are coming in for presentations and interviews tomorrow. So after that, we will have our final selection for the respondent, and we will bring that back on February 11th for your approval.
See, doesn't that work well? You know, we've got the placeholder, we have time to do it before a voting meeting, and they'll be ready.
Yes.
We'll know who we're looking at to choose from.
Yes.
Okay. I assume there's not any questions at this point because placeholder. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll see that on next Tuesday. Finance,
All right, Amanda Long again, Deputy Finance Director. The first item is our budget amendments for the month. Arbor Valley paid the development agreement to move the WIC trailer. So they paid for both of those moves, and now it's back here. Building Development has been using their operating budget to remodel that WIC building. So we're going to offset that credit by adding back to his maintenance and repair budget. So you see we're increasing the revenue and increasing the expense.
I didn't know who to thank, but thank you for going light on us on the budget amendments. I mean, we've had sometime almost 2 pages. This is one. This is great. We knew this was coming. They were going to, and it offset the total cost that we spent with our moves and everything. And it was related to Arbor Apartments, right? They paid this fee. Okay. Any questions from council? Anyone opposed to making this consent item number 4?
Nope.
Okay. Oh, you've got the next one too, don't you?
I do.
Approve the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority loan resolution and execute the agreement for the North Bypass 12-inch water main. And this is when we talk about GFA, who we're talking about. Georgia Environmental Finance Authority.
Okay,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
a few months ago, you approved for us to go back to GFA and ask for a loan modification. And the purpose of those funds was going to be to add the water line at the north bypass that's coming. So it's going to be cheaper if we do that up front, and not try to go back after the road is complete and add that. So they approved that last week, I believe, last Tuesday, 2.250, loan origination fee of $33,000, interest rate 2.35% over 20 years. So if y'all are ready, we can move forward with that.
Yeah, we said this is what we wanted to do. We just had to wait for approval. Any questions?
Nope.
Anyone opposed to making this consent item number 5?
Nope.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. All right, Parks and Recreation and Leisure Services.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Karina Martinez, Events Manager. So I was tasked with doing the RFP for our production and artist services for 2025. Staff recommends that RCS is the most qualified. Overall, we actually received 5 bids, and between a group of 5 people, we actually scored, and RCS was the highest scoring one out of all of them based on the requirements that we've put in the RFP. the total amount that RCS gave us for their proposal was $114,944. And you can see it broken down. We actually do 2 contracts with them. We do a production contract and an artist contract as well.
So we spoke on the phone yesterday. I had some questions, some concern to a degree even on how much we spend on concerts and are we getting the best deal we can. Were you able to get those copies for us?
Yes, I have them here.
Okay, could we get those?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because this was 50 pages plus of documentation. So I'm reading all through the totals, the subtotals, what's for them doing setup, and then it's a separate cost for the bands. But the bands are within a range, so we still have an idea because we've asked for bands within a certain price range. So we can estimate that. The one thing we don't know is what the band rider will be. We don't get that till 2 weeks before the concert, and those riders can vary because that's where they say, well, we need 2 hotel rooms or we would like 6 hotel rooms, or this is what we require for food, or so it's what they're asking of us in addition to just the cost of coming and playing.
Correct.
Right.
So that would be the hospitality rider. And what I do want to clarify is that the hotel rooms come out of the city Main Street budget for only the concerts and Gold Rush. July 3rd, we don't do hotel rooms, so that's pretty much out of the picture. But as far as the food and catering for the concerts, Gold Rush, and for the Art and Soul, I believe, it comes out of the sponsorships that Main Street receives for every event. And as far as July 3rd, they actually have it budgeted in their budget.
Okay, so let me just look at an example real quick here since we just got this. The Villa Rica Art and Soul Festival, it has a production cost. That's them setting up, getting the lights, sound, all that.
Correct.
But where are the bands in that one?
So that is actually a revamped of the West Georgia Jazz Festival. We're actually going to do local bands, which would cost us way less, as if RCS would be getting the bands for us.
And I don't mean it's always necessarily what's less, but there's some good local talent out in, and when I say local, I don't just mean Villa Rica, I just mean this West Georgia area. We have had phenomenal music artists come out of this. When Milltown was open, we'd hear, a little bit more about that. Okay, so then, but eventually we'll get that cost. So we don't know the total cost of what that event's going to be at this point because we don't have the band cost, right?
Correct, not at this time.
All right, so, but the next one, and then I'll stop with that one, unless someone else has a question. That one gives the artist cost, $10,350, and then the estimated production cost, I'm sure that's somewhat of what the band requires.
Correct.
Mics, lineup, all that stuff, that's a little bit over my head. And that's them doing all the rest of the setup.
Yes.
So we'd be talking about that concert would basically be 16,000 plus some change.
Correct, just for production and artists, then you have to factor in all of the smaller cost, so.
Right, we have additional staffing. And the reason I bring this up is it's important for the governing body to know what these things are truly costing us in total. So at this point, we still don't have the rider, and you said there's some other costs. And then I might dig a little deeper, but I'll do that separate from the meeting on just seeing what we're doing. But thank you. It's good to hear that we're using some more local artists, and y'all have done a great job. With getting, I think, a lot more variety these last couple of years.
Thank you.
Everybody's not stuck in an 80s band with big hair or something. I
Yes.
really like that we're doing a variety.
We're doing inclusiveness for all.
Okay, you said you analyzed about 6 different people, productions? This was the low bidder, or was this?
It was not the lowest bidder, but it was the most thorough bidder. And I say that because the other companies that we received bids from, they did not have the proper budget in place. If I'm speaking correctly, they didn't itemize their what we asked in the RFP correctly. Most of them did not give us a thorough production breakdown as far as what they would bring. And as you can see in the agenda packet, RCS literally breaks down everything from lighting and anything that they need for production versus the other companies did not. And actually one company, they ended up being higher. So I think it was Harper House for 98,000, and I totaled the cost and it's actually 104. So some companies, their pricing was not what, we totaled it out to be, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And the total price for everything, the entire series, is 114.
Correct. That includes the July 3rd as well, which that will come out of the Parks
It
and
includes
Rec.
the what?
July 3rd.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So that's for overall events.
Yeah, okay. Councilman Momtahan?
So, Karina, this is just for the production part. This is not for the artist yet.
It is. It includes artists. It's
It
an
does include
estimated.
Okay. But we approve of this and we're approving the artist side of it as well.
Correct. Just an estimation of what the artist will cost. We won't know until we actually pick the bands exactly what the amount will be, but that's an estimate from previous years.
Okay.
That RCS has done.
Okay, so that I guess that makes this question a little bit more relevant than I thought it was originally. So when I was on Main Street, at that time, many of our artists were kind of like one-hit wonders from the 80s or 70s. And now I'm looking at this kind of proposed list here on whatever page this is, page 5 of 21, so I think this is in there. And I see there's the 70s punk rock band, which I probably assume is something like Velcro Pygmies or something like that.
Right along those lines.
Right, and then I see 1, 2, 3 tribute bands. So they're cover bands. They're not like the actual band anymore. And then an opening, and then it looks like a Motown oldies classic R&B, which I would again suppose that's probably a cover band.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess my thing is like, what is kind of prohibiting the city from getting the actual artist or more higher profile artist?
Honestly, in my opinion, it would be the budget.
Okay.
Because right now, if you total up the Main Street side, because right now we're speaking on Main Street side, if you total it up, is way under what we budgeted for the fiscal year. And so currently, if we would like to get those actual bands, we could. We just,
Okay. Because I look at, like, for example, Heard County has like these monthly or weekly concerts at their Performing Arts Center, and they're all country bands, but they're like Mark Wills,
right,
Montgomery Gentry, artists that had sustained careers in the 90s, not even just one-hit wonders. I think last year or the year before, Carrollton had Shenandoah or Black Hawk, and they had a kind of a mixture of these tribute bands, but then they had at least 1 or 2 concerts with actually like higher profile bands. And I guess I'm trying to figure out, like, why do we appear to be limiting ourselves to just these tribute bands?
But costs as well, right? But this year for Gold Rush, we want to do something else. And as you saw, Gold Rush has like a 16,000 for opening and headlining. So that's kind of more towards the path that we're going to, at least for Gold Rush, because that is downtown's biggest event. But for summer concerts, we can keep it in the tribute band side. For bigger festivals like July 3rd or Gold Rush, then we can bring in those bigger bands.
Okay.
How much was the budget for this item?
Say that again.
How much was this item budgeted for?
For Main Street, it was 145,000.
Okay.
But for July 3rd, which is Parks and Rec, I believe it was somewhere between 27 to 30,000 for the event itself.
We had 27,000 budgeted for July 3rd.
There you go.
I think it's important to take note that there's a difference between a profit-making group that's putting on concerts where you pay for tickets. You pay for tickets to go. Milltown was wonderful. They were actually very reasonable, bringing in big names. I mean, it was great going out there. But you weren't going out there for 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. I mean, it's a decent cost. We are doing this even though often hotel motel tax was used with Main Street.
It used to, I think.
Used to, so I'm still getting used to the way we've changed this. This is still taxpayer money. So it's not going to be spent in the same way as, these music venues that are charging people, good money to come to concerts and get those big bands. And I will just say this, some of these tribute bands, we packed out the place for our Lions Club one with the tribute, the Eagles tribute band, and the same one for the one that does the Journey one.
Right.
Whatever, I can't think of their name right offhand. They're really good, and people seem to really enjoy it. And to be honest, sometimes they can still hit the notes better than the old guys can. Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to piggyback on what Matthew said, and as a caveat, I think you were saying the one-hit wonders. Woodstock does a good job of that. I think they had Craig Morgan, who I think was like relevant like 10 years ago, but like he's actually watching this. But anyway, but I know that where I worked close to the Brave Stadium, and a lot of people that lived in like Kennesaw and Smyrna and stuff, they're like, oh, we're going up there to go see that because it was a name that got people's attention. And to kind of, I hate using the word devil's advocate, but to say this, and I never give shout outs to my hometown, but I'm from North Alabama, and we used to have a municipal thing on 4th of July where it was a bigger venue than anything we have here, but it was back, and I don't know where the money came from, I was 10, but it was an all-day thing where we had, and it was free, where we had different events. And like you had the local artist, and it went down to a headliner, and a headliner was usually like an up and coming band that people had heard of. So I'm just saying it can be done, but I understand what you mean about the price constraints. But I think we would need to up our budget and kind of have not a plan, but kind of a vision of how we want to do this. Because again, I am. Even though I'm a little bit older, I'm like Matthew. I'm tired of the cover bands and the '80s bands all the time.
Yep.
But that's just my 2 cents.
And so we can also work with the budget that's already budgeted, but also lean into the sponsorships, which is what we're pursuing this year. So we've revamped the sponsorships, which also can get money in our overall money pot, so that we can get those bigger named.
Well, I guess
bands.
my next. I'm sorry, Shirley. Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I was for the Thomas Dorsey. We do sponsorship, so we don't charge tickets to come in, but we try to keep it like that. But we need to like they're saying upgrade our entertainment.
Right.
And so, I think we're working on that.
Yes, yes, we are.
I think you're working with.
Yeah, I'm working with Eric. Yes.
To get more people to come out to see, because that a lot of times is what we need. People are gonna come out for who they like, and if they don't know them, they're not gonna come out.
Right.
Or if they're tired of this one, they're not gonna come out. So it's a win-win situation. Sometimes if you do it just right and you get the people to come on out.
Yep. That's right.
And
I was just going to add. I mean, I think obviously budget season starts in August, and I just would like to see how much it would cost to get the change. I mean, what are we talking about? $1,000? Or are we talking about $10,000? I have no idea as I sit here right now to see what that difference is. And so I would just like to see, keep in mind when budget season starts up again, say, well, okay, if you want to do this style of band or this whatever, it'll cost X number of dollars, and we feel that we can generate sponsorships to offset Y number of dollars, or whatever it may be. That at this point, I mean, that's just all I can ask for at this point. Is I just want to see the options.
Absolutely, I can begin those conversations with RCS as of right now, so that they can go ahead and give me an estimate, and that way we can go ahead and budget it for the next.
Right, or we can at least talk
budget.
about it next year. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, okay.
So it won't be Elton John, but we did have the tribute, Elton John and the Piano Man. You know who I'm talking about, that concert.
Billy Joel.
Yeah, that one packed out really big too, but I try to come when I can. Anything else? Anyone opposed to making this consent item number 6?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Public Works. Mr. Waits, get to talk to us about the cemetery. That's a controversial topic right there.
Council, I'm telling you. Ethan Waits, Grounds Maintenance Manager. So just to give you guys a little backstory, I guess. we used to have 2 Carroll County inmate crews, and that consisted of 6 guys per crew. Obviously, that comes up to 12. Pandemic happened. We haven't seen them since. We've reached out. When Tom was here, Charlie Davis, I'm sure y'all remember Charlie. He reached out a ton. I've personally reached out and talked to the guys, and the inmates aren't coming back. So obviously that puts a lot more strain on the grounds maintenance department. We have went to Express Staffing Agency for temporary employees. That's from April to September. That's quote unquote growing season, but as you guys know, Georgia weather, it's really more like middle of March to November. So in all reality, the cemetery is almost 13 acres. It's a ton of weed eating, mowing, edging, blowing. I mean, the overall maintenance it's a lot. So I have a total of 13 employees now with the temps, and that's including myself. So if you do the numbers on that, obviously we're a lot less staff versus when we had the inmate crew. So I reached out to several different vendors about a yearly contract. So this is all 12 months. So they cut the grass, weed eat, blow, mow, edge, weed killer in the areas that's got the gravel. Fall rolls around, leaf cleanup, trash pickup. It's the whole 365-day service. So I've attached the quotes here. Brothers Landscaping is $4,000 monthly, comes out to $48,000 a year. JTN Landscaping Maintenance is $4,270 monthly, $51,240 yearly. And then Alternative Environments, which I'm sure you guys are aware that is they're right here off Old Town Road, and they already do a lot of work for us. And that is, in fact, who I'm recommending. That comes out to $3,647 monthly, $43,770 yearly. And with you guys' approval, this will just really benefit the cemetery and how we're representing the family's plots. You know, the maintenance will overall be a lot better. I'm not able to get out there as, you know, I cannot set a bi-weekly schedule to be out there, let's say the 15th and the 30th of every month, just because we got the events, we got City Hall, all the parks we're taking care of. We continue to grow, purchase some more properties like community development. What are we calling it? The community parking lot now? Downtown parking lot. Okay, it's changed. So you guys obviously get the point. We continue to grow, continue to have more properties that is under my care. So with y'all's approval, this will just really take a big burden off the grounds maintenance department, and obviously the care of the cemetery would be.
Yeah,
I know
when we get the complaints when people go on Mother's Day or whatever. Right. I was getting the emails of if things weren't mowed and maintained, and losing those jail crews was massive.
Right.
I had heard that it wasn't it happened at COVID, but also there was a problem with them staffing them with enough guards. They were short on those, and they belong to Carroll County. So if Carroll County needs them, because as far as I know, all the cities got cut off. We were fortunate. I think we kept them longer than some cities.
I believe so.
Yeah, so that was a massive loss, but what are we going to do? We can't control it.
It says it's a budgeted item. What was the budget on this item?
So we put the money in MR Grounds line item for this. So it wasn't it's not a capital item. It's coming out of the MR Grounds line item.
What's the budget?
So he's asking, like, overall, what is your budget? So
it's 189, I believe.
189 for grounds maintenance
for the whole city in terms of landscaping maintenance.
for the year.
Right.
Annual, okay.
Yeah. So this would just be one portion of it.
About a fourth of it thereabouts.
So one other thing, back in, I don't know, it could have been 15, 16, when we took on maintenance of state roadways, but GDOT pays us to do it, are we okay on that? Because we cover all that too. I mean, they may be giving us the money, but we're doing it. Are y'all able to keep up?
Are you talking about like what we call the gateway in front of or are you talking about throughout the whole entire city?
Throughout the city, but I know it includes those gateways that we got with grant money. Are y'all okay? I mean, do you feel like this is going to assist you?
Hal would have the best answer because I don't maintain all the right of ways.
Yeah. Unless it's a problem. I mean, if
I
y'all are okay.
I don't want to speak for him.
Yeah.
I know the right of way maintenance that I take care of is we're fine.
Okay.
So repeat the question if you wouldn't mind.
As far as around the city, it was back in, say, 15, 16, under a particular city manager that we took on the care of the state road right-of-ways because, to be honest, we kept them up better. And they're in the city and they reflect on us. Are you okay with the maintenance, with staying on top of that?
So the streets department does the majority of that maintenance as well as our community service that does our litter picking up on those areas as well. So they do it with the brush hogs and stuff, and that wouldn't necessarily be impacted by Ethan's crew necessarily. So that wouldn't change.
Okay.
That would continue the way that it is. But we're doing a great job at it.
Okay,
So
thank
that
you.
answers the question.
Yeah, I know. Picking up the garbage is really fun. It just amazes me how much people throw out. I appreciate our public works on that. Any questions? Anyone opposed to making this consent item number 7? It was hard to argue with your argument. I mean, because we know it. We know we used to have all those additional
Yes, ma'am.
crews.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item G, community development. I was about to say Miss Shabazz. No. Ms. Cox, how are you today?
Hi, I'm well, thank you. Good afternoon. Whitney Cox, licensing specialist. My first item, is an alcoholic beverage license application for Fast Events Corporation. I'm doing business as Shell Food Mart. It's located at 15041 Veterans Memorial Highway. The business is an existing convenience store with gas pumps and has held a valid license or alcohol license, but did not renew for this license year by the deadline and owner was required to apply for a new license.
Okay, so they missed the deadline. Any questions from council?
Does that mean they're paying a penalty for missing the deadline?
No, the penalty is having to reapply and go through the approval process all over again.
There's another application fee, is that what it is?
Correct.
Okay.
This one will require a public hearing, so it'll be coming back on Tuesday. Okay, we're done with that one. We'll see it on Tuesday. Number 2, temporary limited alcohol pouring license for Georgia Food Industry Education Foundation.
Yes. This is the annual Mirror Lake Golf Tournament that's held by the Georgia Food Industry Association. It will be on Wednesday, April the 30th from 7:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. They historically have come before the council, not specifically for the special event, but for the license to pour beer and wine on that one day. Some background on them. They're the sole association in Georgia that is dedicated to regulatory fairness in the food industry. They're looking to host about 350 members that day in an effort to raise scholarship money. And they were not required to do any type of public noticing, so it should not require a public hearing.
Any questions? Nope. Anyone opposed to making this consent item number 8? Next part is text number 3, TA-02-25. There's Ms. Shabazz. Good afternoon. Text amendment to modify peddlers and solicitation, and this does require a public hearing.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Pardon my voice. I know I sound wonderful right now. I've been coughing all weekend. Decided to take up hiking, and I thought I gave myself acute asthma because I kept coughing, but it kind of developed into, I'm not sure what this is, but I'm going to try to get through it without a coughing attack. So this is a text amendment to modify the peddler solicitation and canvassing permit and process. This is an update to the previous text amendment that was heard on December 10th. And so I just wanted to kind of clarify. So I did add some clarifying language as to why it's coming back or coming back new because we did change the process. We changed the fee, and so we wanted to bring that back before you. The previous text amendment had a different fee and schedule. Currently, the process is within the Villa Rica Police Department, and upon discussion with city officials, it was determined that the process, which includes an updated application, should be overseen by the Community Development Department. We did also create a new application, and the new fee schedule it's going to be, based on recommendation, an annual fee as opposed to every week when they come in. So it's going to be an annual fee. And I thought, based off of some of the research that I had done, that an annual one-time fee of $100 as opposed to every single time $25 they come in. This is just kind of consistent with what I've seen in other cities. Currently, where I live in Cobb County, there was he does boiled peanuts. He's there twice a week. And so I just kind of took in account some of the other peddlers that I see in other jurisdictions and just kind of looked at their price and their fee schedule. And I figured that if they apply, if they're there 4 times, 5 times, they've already have a cost savings. And so I thought that would be kind of a fair.
And y'all aren't having to do it every week or whatever with
Right.
them constantly coming in.
Right. And so staff recommendation is just approval. I put with conditions in case there was any kind of need for a discussion, or if you all wanted to maybe modify the fee schedule or the permit, the actual schedule itself.
We didn't get to talk yesterday, so I think my only question I had is, what happens when somebody just comes in to set up for a day? I don't mean a planned city event. Those are vendors that come, and that's all handled by staff. Are there ones that just come in that wouldn't need an annual one? They just come for, I don't know, those people that pop up with the phones now and then? I mean, I imagine they come to you.
Yeah, that would be handled under our special event application. Sometimes we'll have people that will come in for like a marathon, or sorry, no, I sound horrible.
It's okay. No, you can't help it.
But sometimes we do have special events, and so that would be handled under our special event application.
Okay. There aren't other peddlers that just come in and say, can we set up? I know we don't bother the Girl Scouts because you don't mess with Girl Scout
No,
cookies.
you do
That'll
not.
get you in trouble. We had that happen one time. There's any independent ones that just come in on their own that would only be a 1 or 2 time that you'd have to are
Well,
we
I've seen-
prepared to handle that?
Well, I mean, I've seen like across from my office, there's that kind of vacant parcel, and I've seen, like the mayor said, some that come in and start to sell cell phones, and they're there for an afternoon, and I may never see them again.
I don't even know if they're okay.
Yeah,
Maybe
and-
that's illegal to just like pop up and start selling something, especially.
It is.
Like,
I mean, if we have
they may not even have okay with the property owner.
Right. That's right. Though, the rogue one-offs. Are
y'all set up though to handle not the rogue, Just the
Yes.
person that's, okay.
Yes, we have a special event permit process that people can come in if they just want to do. Currently, we also have people that have been asking about block parties, and that would still be handled under our special event application. So we already have an event that would be, an application and a process for those kinds of occasions.
I see. Okay.
Questions?
Yeah, you're changing 8118 and 8120, but I don't see what it was before this. Is this just the change we're seeing here on the screen?
I'm sorry, what was the?
You're putting in what the changes are, but it doesn't say what it was. What
Oh,
it
like a
was
red
before.
line copy?
Yeah.
Oh, I can upload the previous one. I didn't put in. I just
Normally we
updated.
see the one in yellow, you show us what the change is going to be, so we can see what difference is, what you're changing.
I can add that. I can add the previous copy. The change was the annual fee of 100. It was $50 prior, but I can add
It's
that.
just the numbers changed, is that it?
The number has changed. Yes.
Okay, how about 8120, what's changed in that one?
Let's see. Okay, so currently, it talks about, we omitted the vest in terms of handing out a city designated vest, because that's something that I didn't think that we would want to be able to take on in terms of, taking care of their safety and security. So I omitted that because I thought that would be a lot in terms of liability to take on. So I can upload the previous copy.
I'd appreciate that.
Sure.
Thanks for catching that. I forgot. A lot of times we will do a red line so we understand what it changed from. This does require a public hearing, so it needs to come
Yes.
back Tuesday. If there are any more questions, we'll move on to the next item. All right, item number 4, TA-03-25, text amendment to add new section to Article 3, heavy motor vehicle. This also will require a public hearing. Give us kind of a synopsis.
Yes, and this, just to clarify, this is not a part of our zoning ordinance, and so this is a little out of, what I'm currently accustomed to. This is more of our code of ordinances that, we actually added a section. And so, I'm more than happy if council wants to kind of provide feedback, or they want to make other suggestions, because, I do realize that this is not, part of the zoning ordinance, which I would ordinarily have discretion, I guess, over. So I wanted to mention that we looked at.
You can blame it on me, by the way, because no, I was receiving the complaints of the Jake breaks and the things that come through neighborhood areas close to residential and make these really loud noises at various times of the day and night, because we have state highways going all through as well. And so I checked with a number of truckers that I knew lived in the city and try to get their feedback and expertise on it to give us some guidance, because they know what needs to be used and what doesn't, and how people break the rules or don't break the rules. So anyway, so that's how it came about. That's the background.
Right. Okay, I didn't want to.
No, it's okay. I mean,
throw you under the truck.
No. We got complaints about it, and this was our way of looking into it, so.
Yeah, so I did take a stab at it. One of the things that I also
Sorry.
did, prior to this, is I actually rode around the city, and while staff doesn't really have a way to, I do think this is a much wider conversation. I did take a drive around the city, and most of the streets that the Jake break ordinance, this new ordinance would apply to, they already have signage that says no trucks over 6 wheels. And I saw multiple trucks, 18-wheelers using all of those streets. And so it's one of those things, it's a little tricky to be there at the time that the Jake break is used. I did actually hear one outside my window, but if you're not right there at the time, then it's a little bit hard, at least for our ability to be able to enforce. Since I am over code enforcement, that is something that I wouldn't be able to have our code enforcement, enforce. So I
Yeah,
just wanted to-
it's law enforcement, and I think we're hoping that the signage
Yeah.
will have an impact, that they'll know, when they're entering the city. And if you consider the way 60, until we have the bypass, if you consider the way this is a state road coming right out here, going down in front of these houses past here, then it turns by Happy Valley, goes all by residential, because that's Highway 61, Dallas Highway. And of course, they're going down the roads they're not supposed to, like Rock Mart, Punkin Town, things like that.
Right.
Yeah. And that's right, we got a problem over there.
Long trucks come through there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and backing up, and they tear stuff up, they're hitting the car. I can see the signs they hit around town where they can't make the turn, over by
Yeah.
the new fire station too.
Absolutely. So basically, what we recommend is that along with the signs that are already in place for no trucks over 6 wheels, that we can add additional signage that says Jake brakes prohibited or something of that nature. Other jurisdictions have similar signs. The only thing that I think might need to be looked into is that whether or not it's a state highway, because that would take another level of authorization in terms of prohibition. So, I mean, if it is a state designated highway, then I believe that does take another level of authority for
Yeah,
for
it's some
the
sort of
city to-
permit, the same way we
Mhm.
have to if we put up the flashing signs on Dallas Highway with the speed limit. I'm hoping it's not onerous, but the fact is, all our entry roads are state highways.
Yeah.
If they're gonna see them on their way coming in from Dallas Highway, 61 this way, 78 this way, we're gonna have to put them on a state highway, but I don't know what they
Yeah.
require with that permit. Hopefully, it's
But
not
do
a
you
pain
think
in the
those
neck.
signs gonna do any good? Cause like you're talking about on Pumpkin Town Road, and they got them big signs up there the size of trucks. You got,
Yeah.
and I mean you see them, and I mean the police can't stand up there 24 hours a day, and then here comes a big long truck, and you be like, but there's no police out there, so they just keep going, and they use their GPS as an excuse.
Yep.
My GPS told me to go this way.
Right.
But they don't have an up-to-date GPS. That's what it is.
Right. So I just wanted to, along with all of that, along with what I witnessed and along with what we all know that occurs, this is what I felt would be the best thing that staff could do. So we did recommend that Jake brakes only be used in emergency situations where imminent danger is trying to be prevented. But other than that, there's not much on my end in terms of enforcement that I can do. But we did say that we could add additional language to cover Jake brakes. And
we did get some advice from people that this is their line of work. They're truckers that drive all over the place that felt like it would be helpful to us, but.
Okay, I'm not a trucker, so what's a Jake brake?
It's a compression brake, basically, or they call them engine brakes. But I guess the nickname would be Jake brakes. But it's the really loud, rumbling noise. It almost sounds like a muffler, like when you hear it engaged. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say I Googled it because I didn't know what it was either when I was looking at the packet, and I YouTubed it to see what kind of sound it made. So it's like if they're going really fast, kind of over speed bumps. It's like a bump, bump. Well, I'm not going to do it, but I'm not going to do it. But it struck something in my mind that you hear it more on the interstate. I think I hear it more on the interstate than I do in town, and I'm not saying they don't do it or don't have a reason to do it, but my question with this whole thing is, how is this going to be enforced? Is this going to be like the police officers are going to or code enforcement's going to have to sit, or are citizens going to call and say that, hey, I heard this truck and I got this license number?
It's law enforcement, it's the
Yeah,
police
it's law-
department, because it's.
Yeah, code enforcement won't be out to enforce that, but that's why I'm saying it's a much wider conversation
Okay.
in terms of how what enforcement would look like.
I guess
I know
they'll
they
enforce
shouldn't
it,
need them in town, but that's from the truckers telling us.
Right.
they're gonna
No,
enforce
they
it the
shouldn't
same
need
way they enforce Pumpkin Town Road, no trucks.
Yeah, that was.
They're just gonna watch them go by.
So what I understand is the Jake brake actually slows the engine down before they hit the brakes on the tires, which is where the compression noise comes from. And so if you're going 35 on 61 downtown, you probably shouldn't need your Jake brake because you're not going that fast. But the
That's
problem
what the
is,
truckers are
they're
saying,
not
that there's
going.
no
Yeah.
reason, and just out of etiquette,
Right.
they don't use them in residential. Those are the people that
Yeah.
have etiquette.
Right.
But they did say there, when you're dealing with hills, things like that, and greater speed,
Mhm.
that there should be no reason to be using them within city limits.
Right. So this is just adding some additional language, to our code, because we didn't have a section that address the compression brakes, and so I added the additional language that we could put up with the no trucks over 6 wheels. So we just added another section, a Jake brake prohibition.
Okay, so that'll be back Tuesday.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you. All right, utilities. Mr. Bras, how are you today?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Eric Bros, Wastewater Operations Manager. This is for the combined vacuum truck. This is a budgeted item. In the operation of utilities infrastructure, staff identified the need for an efficiently collect and transport liquid waste and debris and contaminated materials, prevent spills, flooding, and environmental pollution, and to reduce the operational and emergency repair cost. This vehicle would be able to be used for multiple departments, mainly for resulting in blocked sewers throughout the city, factoring out manholes and removing the debris and transporting it over to our wastewater plants to be disposed of. The other multiple options with this includes a hydro excavating equipment, which would help in locating and repairing water and sewer lines. With this equipment as well too, we try to minimize it as much as possible. Emergencies, shutdowns of equipment, but sometimes we do have to shut down the equipment. So with this equipment going out there, it would help us compared to running out there and trying to, say, fix a mechanical problem before we have a potential spill at one of our locations. Having this equipment would allow us to bring the vacuum truck out there, keep the wet well maintained and everything while we're fix the solution out there compared to, as I said before, having a potential environmental spill out in the facilities. Regarding that too, staff received 3 closed bids. And staff recommends engaging with Environmental Products Group. The total amount is $549,828. The reason staff is not suggesting with going with the lowest bid is due to multiple specs not being matched within the bid process with the lowest bid.
Questions?
Well, I guess, Eric, I've heard that these are really difficult and onerous to maintain, these vehicles. Is that something that we're confident that's not going to be an issue, or is there some sort of maintenance agreement or something that can assist with that?
Absolutely. So we do have, once we get approval and we do purchase the equipment, they come out for multiple days. I believe it's about 3 or 4 days. They will come out, explain the basic of the PMs, taking care of that equipment as well too, because there is a monthly, a weekly, and a daily preventative maintenance to work with that machine due to all moving parts and everything. Regarding fixing and repairing, if there is major things that need to be outsourced, they are located right in Atlanta, so they are not far, and they can help us, and they also have techs that can come out and assist us as needed as well. And they have explained to us too that they are more than welcome while they are working on this equipment, that if we would like, they could come out to us, as long as they don't need to be in their shop. If say it's something that's out in the field they can fix, they have no problem showing staff and training staff on how to fix that for the future as well too.
So I guess in addition to kind of that, what it sounds like a kind of complementary training, I mean, do we have operators that need to be certified or formally trained in this equipment?
Yeah, so what they'll do is, as I'm one of them too, I have operated this equipment before, so I will be helping staff with the learning process of operating this kind of equipment, as well as the manufacturer does come out, as I was saying before, and do a training on that. But it's more of a learning process. It does require a Class B CDL, which a couple of the staff members already have. We have it budgeted this year for the training to have other staff members get the CDL as well, too, for that licensure.
Thank you.
It sounds like it works with liquid, but also, when I was reading this, said that they can go in and use this to vacuum dirt and material out to get to mains. and
Exactly,
all.
so, yeah.
So is that what makes it a combination vacuum truck?
Exactly. So there's multiple options on there, but there is that's hydro excavators. That section of it. And what it pretty much is you got a high pressure nozzle, and you have staff out there with the vacuum portion out there as well too, and that's picking up all the debris as you're cutting through with the hydro excavator. And then that helps with too is potentially if there's other utility lines out there that you can hit. This is a more safer approach to going into there and getting closer to our water and sewer, not damaging potentially another utility system up there.
This is an expensive piece of equipment. I think that's why the question is.
No, I understand.
Y'all take care of that thing.
Yeah, it's
right.
Where's Environmental Products Group? Where are they located?
in Atlanta.
In Atlanta?
Yep.
Too bad Peach State didn't get it because they're our new neighbors out on Edge Road.
If there aren't any other questions, anyone opposed to making this consent item number 9? Okay, that'll be number 9.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, City Manager, Ms. DeSanto.
Diana DeSanto, Interim City Manager, and believe it or not, mine are actually relatively short. So I do have 4 items for you to consider, nothing necessarily to take action on, but the first item is administrative, essentially. At the last meeting, Main Street had presented some bylaw amendment updates, and I think the action of the council was to table and them take it back to their January Main Street meeting. They did meet, they talked about the different items. They want to essentially withdraw the request at this time. They have completed or are working to complete their 4-year assessment, and they're doing a lot of planning right now in terms of event programming for the year. So it is not their intent to update at this time. It gives them obviously the feedback that they've received from the meeting for them to look at things, but they just want us to withdraw the request since it was tabled instead of withdrawn at the time.
Okay.
So that's all the first one is.
This one was a little more complicated.
This mid-block crossing,
Yes,
it can actually be short and sweet. It just depends on how far you want me to get into this. So I did not do a cover sheet because, again, I'm not necessarily asking for action at this time. It's really more of an update. We meet with Falcon every other week, and we kind of have ongoing conversations and dialogue, and every so often we'll hit a point and I say, well, let me go take that back to council and let's just have a conversation. So for our viewing audience at home or anybody who maybe is less familiar with this, I believe it was either last spring or summer, we had some residents and constituents in the Villa Rica High School area just very concerned with all of the growth and development that's happened in the area and concerns for the children's safety crossing 78, if for no other reason than to go to the Dairy Queen that's across the street. Not to say there aren't other reasons as well. And at that time, right, getting in and out of school, going to Dairy Queen, So at the time, I think Councilman Momptahan had said, what are we going to do about this area? Can we look at this area? Around the same time, I think both Councilman Momptahan and Mayor McPherson, y'all attended a briefing by Grant Waldrop at the chamber for GDOT, and we learned that there was going to be a future fix in the area of a roundabout at Rocky Branch and 78. So kind of combining the constituents' concerns with what we knew was coming, we said maybe we should look at this and see if GDOT would look at it with us. You guys, I believe in October or November authorized us to do a traffic study to see if there was a pedestrian crossing warranted, which essentially is what this is. So roundabout way of saying this is a copy of the study. And I can read if your preference is for me to read, but essentially
Hit the highlights.
What I learned from it was they did go out in December, which is a colder month. Granted, that's when we authorized the study to take place. They did go when school was in session. They only found, I think, maybe 2 or 3 instances of anyone crossing the street, but I do think you have to factor, weather into that conversation. Taking that with the fact that based on the speed and the number of lanes with 78, I don't think there is a temporary solution that is affordable. That is the highlights of this. Ultimately, because of the intersection, because of the sidewalk that would be needed, and because of the number of lanes that would need to be crossed, we would have to look at a pedestrian hybrid beacon, which, fun fact, is very expensive. How expensive, you ask? Over $1 million.
Really?
Yes.
What is this beacon that looks different from the ones we're used to seeing? It's.
So I don't have any kind of drawing
I was
of
trying
that,
to
but
visualize what it.
it's essentially to protect, like arms come down and protect the crossing.
Oh.
So yeah, it's very involved, and essentially based on the design that we know is coming from GDOT in 2 years, it would be ripped up. It will be ripped up.
Yeah, and we weren't looking for anything like that.
Right.
We were just
That-
looking for a way for pedestrians to get from one side to the other safer, especially kids from the school.
So the recommendation that I received essentially, and again, just wanted to provide that update back to you guys, is when that roundabout comes in, it's going to have what are called pedestrian refuge islands that go around.
Like the mid, yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So kind of it's unfortunate. We have a lot of growth right now. There probably is a need. But the advice is to wait until GDOT puts in the roundabout.
I mean, how much, I mean.
That was your concern, wasn't it? That it was going to be like 2 years or something?
Yeah, I mean.
We didn't know.
I mean, I guess, I just feel like, yeah, it's gonna be 2 years, and we're gonna have, if you go look at that aerial, I mean, you see the big dirt where it says new townhomes there, and those folks are gonna be coming in, and, I mean, is there not an alternative to the beacon? I mean, could we put in the refuge things now, or could GDOT install them now? I think that's just kind of, I mean, it sounds like we over-engineered this thing. That's what it sounds like.
We can have a conversation. I will tell you, the last time I talked to GDOT about this project and the other project, it was essentially at your own cost, at your own peril. There's no money. The way they explained it to me is this year's budget is already budgeted unless it's an emergency. Because next year's budget is within a year of the project budget, they're not going to add it there either. And they used a term, and I'm sorry I don't have my notes on me right now, but there's a term they use to describe those type of discretionary dollars, but that because of the timing of that roundabout, we just wouldn't qualify for it. They would support us doing something.
At our own expense.
You say the roundabout's 2 years away.
Yes, sir. March 2027.
On construction.
Yes. On construction. That, to be fair, yes, to bid. March 2027 to bid.
Just so you'll know the background, because this predates you to a degree, it's gone probably a decade, maybe more, that the city had been, because it predated me, had been asking for a light there for GDOT forever. Students coming out in cars, right? Okay, so some of you, you'll know better than I do how long that's been, and they would never give it to us. And I'm going, I don't know why they can't give us one of those lights that you just time it.
Yep.
You know, when school's going in and when school's coming out, and the rest of the time, you know, it's
have
operating in traffic. And it was that's why we got to, well, can we get anything to make it safer?
The light you're
And,
speaking of, they have at Paulding County High School on 61 in Dallas. If the school's out, it flashes yellow, but if school's in, it's operating. I mean, very simple.
Yeah, we just could never get anything, and this was last resort. Okay.
I mean, so, and I've had constituents tell me that in the past the city has had like a crossing guard there.
That was kind of what we talked about in the meeting, was maybe that's an option in the future.
Okay, when we say the future, I mean, what is that?
If there's enough, is there enough people to?
Well, I mean, that's the
justify
thing. I don't. I'm almost. If I had time this afternoon, I'd probably go sit in that Dairy Queen parking lot and watch all the
'em.
folks crossing the street at this, during this time of day.
And to do it in December,
Yeah,
right?
I know.
So especially if it was a week that's close to finals, just because school was in doesn't mean everybody was there. I mean,
Right.
and I
And
feel
it's
bad because I'm
December
the
and
one who
not-
said, let's move forward with this.
Yeah, and then today it was 70-degree weather, so I'm sure there's going to be a lot more out there, and so, but.
Again,
I
this
don't know.
is an update. I like the idea. I like the feedback that I'm hearing about the crossing guard, because that kind of was you do not want to invest $1 million in this, especially if it's going to be, ripped up in 2 years. would there be a solution with some type of traffic direction
Right.
assistance?
Right.
But would the school be responsible for the cross guard? You know, you see schools where they have to cross the person out there. So is that something that the school would pay for, or is that something that the city would pay for?
That is not a conversation that I've had yet. That is an excellent question.
Yeah, unless it's residential and having to get home, I would just say, y'all head over to where Racetrack and Chick-fil-A is. Take those roads. And we will have, at least as far as the traffic light, there are going to be more ways for students with the way we're doing the additional roads to exit that area. So there won't be as much need for the traffic light
Right.
as there has been for years, but, okay. Anything else? Okay, well, we found out. We got
Yes.
our answer.
Yes.
Update on Mirror Lake left-hand turn lane.
So, more good news.
No,
She's
that's
good
not
news.
really good news.
No, no ways to say it.
Again, I just wanted to give you guys an update. So we meet with Falcon frequently, and at the last meeting, the question was, are you guys ready for us to submit this to the state for erosion control plan review? We can kind of keep going. And I was like, oh, I don't know that I was ready to keep going without you guys seeing that the construction drawings were out there. So we have good news and bad news. We looked at two options with the left-hand turn lane. And one was, how far over would we need to slide the trail? So if you're coming down Mirror Lake Boulevard, you've got the trail to your right, you're coming up, Publix is on your left. This is the left-hand turn lane that we're describing. You've got the left-hand turn lane at the light, so this is just before the light, which right now I've heard, cars can get stacked there when somebody's trying to turn left before the light. This does present kind of an issue and not an emergency, but we're getting close to that emergency point because we have issued an LDP on the development going right at that left-hand turn as well, the Flournoy B. Okay, so we pursued two options. One was moving the trail over significantly, and it would have required the purchase of acquisition for the backyards of residents within Mirror Lake. So it would have been, the cost would have been heavier on the asphalt side and acquisition side, and then obviously the construction of the additional lane. The second option, the option that was provided to you guys called OPC, which is the option of probable cost, that one included a little bit of trail movement, but we were able to stay off of that, stay within our right-of-way, off of any acquisition. Good news. Bad news, it required more guardrail and a little bit of a small wall to be built for safety. Guardrail is not an inexpensive option. So I say all this to say, as Leanne scrolls, this left-hand turn lane has grown to almost $800,000.
Councilman
And so
Momdahan, did
is-
you mention some months ago that this was on a plan? I mean, my feeling is
Yeah.
this should have been required of the developer and never should have fell in our hands to begin
My
with.
recollection was that it was Bobby that said that it was on a plan, that he had done that.
I think
So
it was
I-
we confirmed it was on a preliminary plan. And I'm not going to say anything other than it was confirmed that it was on a preliminary plan, and then it was confirmed that it was not on a final plan.
And I guess a right in, right out there, just modifying is not on the table because I understand, I guess, the delivery trucks or something. Is that what the issue is? Why can't we just do a right in, right out? Just close it off and make it a right in, right out.
Was the plan all along not to move?
You got that.
So two challenges there. We will get challenged heavily by the developer, and that will pose a challenge the more residential that goes down there. It'll be a lot more active in a year. That intersection will be more active in a year.
So see, we're basing it off what's there. Once a development goes in behind and those residents have to
Right.
have a way out.
Behind and next to. So behind, kind of coming down, that they do have a way in and out of Villa Rica Parkway behind the Publix, but next to, that's the one that I've got a little bit more concern.
The one going toward the water. Do you mean the plot going toward plat going toward the water tower? is the one you have more concern
Correct.
about?
Yeah.
Okay, going
Yes.
toward I-20.
Yes.
Because I'm sorry, I don't remember this, but what's supposed to go there?
I can't remember, is it the townhomes or the apartments? I'm so sorry. It's,
Oh.
it's one or the other.
Yeah, the one, I mean.
I think it's the townhomes. I think the apartments are further down the Villa Rica Parkway, but
No, it's
It's
the other way
opposite.
around. Yeah.
Do it every
The
time.
apartments are right there on Mirror Lake
Boulevard, and then the townhomes are
back
behind.
behind the public.
Okay.
So, I mean, I guess then, we could, if the developer or owner doesn't like the fact that we're gonna make it a right in, right out, then maybe that developer can help contribute some expense of the turn lane. Otherwise, we pull our ace in the hole and turn it to a right and right out. It's in our right of way. That's just my view.
Okay.
I mean, it's worth asking, and it's too late now, but it should have been on the plan. It predated you. No, somebody let that be removed and not be there, and it should have been at the cost of the developer. Because the whole reason we needed it is because of their development. So that's a mess up somewhere.
So why are we
the
going,
city.
I'm thinking of it in my head. Why are we going toward the houses? Why aren't we going toward the I mean, it's two sides of the road, and I'm not an engineer, but why are we relocating the cart path or the nature trail and not using something that's on the side that isn't even developed to help do this?
That's a good question.
Two reasons. One is utilities. I know that one. The utilities are a lot worse on that side. I think on the cart path side, it is 2 light poles and a small box and a couple of valve boxes for water. On the other side is where a majority of the utilities are that would have to be moved, which would add to the cost significantly as well. It was not looked at to even go that way, and without showing the conceptual that has topography and some other layers, it's hard to speak to with that not up there. But I know it was never looked at, and I'm assuming it's for those 2 reasons.
Okay, but guardrail's expensive.
Guardrail is expensive.
I'm sure utilities are expensive, but which is more expensive, guardrail or utilities?
Yeah. What options?
With the concrete that we'd also have, I think that side would be more expensive. We did not have them look at it. I feel like there might have been some topography in there that was a challenge too, because I
Okay.
think it kind of dips. I will certainly, we meet again next Wednesday.
So
I'll ask.
It drops on
I'm sorry.
the
Yeah.
path side.
I guess, so the other thing is, I mean, maybe, so in some areas I've seen GDOT do this, and again, I guess because I go to Paulding County Courthouse, but if you're going north on 61, at the intersection of Townsend Road, GDOT installed basically a pass through right there. It's not a turn lane. So the cars are making the left turn in the traveling lane, but there's a paved area that allows persons to pass. So instead of doing a full turn lane, is that an option?
I can ask that question.
Okay.
That's it. May save a little bit, and it's GDOT standards with distance that had to do with the addition of the guardrail. But with the guardrail being surprisingly the more affordable option because of the asphalt and the right of way acquisition, I'll ask that question too. We'll see.
Okay.
Good stuff. Good questions. Thank y'all.
That's just for update purposes. All right, discussion of council workshop dates and locations.
So again, this isn't to solve everything today, but we've definitely, staff has brought me some items that I can give you guys at least 1, if not 2 full days away to talk about. So wanted to see, and I know Councilwoman Warmoth's not here, so I can kind of add this to the end of my city manager report next week, where we can kind of, if you guys can send me some dates, I can provide a solution based on what everybody sends me. But we had talked about maybe either rotating cities or rotating within the city. But I wanted to see if we could at least get one by the end of April. And we can even use the venue at North Avenue I got to use that name. That's the first floor of the Development Services building. But we can use that. And there's just some items coming up with Carroll County looking at a renewal SPLOST potentially this fall. I want to get their feedback. I think they're doing some type of a retreat or planning session in late March, early April. Wanted to get their feedback to understand what our opportunity is to add on to this as well. We've got a list of some different capital planning projects, some different parks projects that we really just want to do some priority and goal setting and kind of get ahead of this year's budget. So those are some major ones. I know we've talked about some other things along the way too, but just wanted to get an idea of some dates in April that we can all meet. We meet, I think, 3 times in March between work sessions and regular meeting nights. So I wasn't going to hit March because of that, but wanted to kind of get an idea of y'all's April dates.
Wait, I'm sorry, we meet 3 times in March? Oh, because of the second work session going in April?
Yeah.
All right, I got it.
And if you guys will even just send me like Fridays are good for me, Thursdays are awful, I'm out of town these days, just anything like that I can kind of put it together. I've asked staff to do the same thing. I know we've got some different team members that have training and spring conferences, and maybe March is the better month, but if you can kind of just look out into the next 6 to 8 weeks and let me know.
So do you want to give us something to work from, like that are definitely blocked out on the staff you would need, or you, and then we can give feedback as to, I can do this day, like that. And
We can do that.
We can
I can
do
give
that
options.
all in email, can't
Yep.
we?
Yep.
And get the feedback and put it together.
But are you guys good? Do you want to look at the venue at North Avenue for that one and make it an all day?
Sure.
It's the first floor of the Development Services building.
I know, I have to keep thinking about what the name is.
It's the
what to
venue at
call-
North Avenue. Well, I don't know. Maybe it won't be that. That's just kind of what we're
Because we
rolling
had a
with right now.
venue over here and you just call it the venue.
Yep.
And, okay. All right. Well,
Awesome.
that was discussion only. We need to figure out something for April. Okay.
Thank
We're done. Item number 1 is the Northwoods Phase 2 plat. Item number 2 is Fairway 16 plat. Number 3 is the gym floor installation. That's 3. Number 4 is the budget amendments. Number 5, G-Falone. Number 6, the concert and festival proposal. And number 7, Hillcrest Cemetery. Number 8 is the temporary alcohol pouring license for the golf thing they have over there at the clubhouse. And number 9 is the purchase of the combination vacuum jet truck. Anybody see anything else? I know. I was trying to figure out compared to like vacuum, it does